Chapter 1098. The attack of the demons was like a surging tide. Even the ghouls could not withstand this endless attack. In the face of so many middle-grade and high-grade demons, the walls of the White Kingdom quickly fell. Then the buildings made of bones were flattened by the demons. Sauron did not even have to do anything, and his subordinates fought all the way to the front of the palace. The guards here were the followers of the Ghoul King, Dor-Isen, who were the barbarians promoted from the Nether Ghouls. They were huge and looked like crazy hyenas. The Ghoul King was still the same as before. Its body was straight, unlike the other ghouls. Its eyes shone with a pale green light. It wore a luxurious robe and leather armor, wore a white bone crown, and held a spine-shaped staff called the Hungry Tooth Staff. Sauron's figure came out. A raging fire ignited on his body. He pulled out a huge beheading sword from the void and then walked toward the Ghoul King, Dor-Isen. Teams of Baelor demons joined the battle. In the White Kingdom, the ghouls were making their last struggle and Sauron was going to kill their king. Body of flame. Endless fire covered a radius of nearly 100 meters. Sauron held the giant beheading sword and approached step by step. The ground under his feet quickly melted into semi-crystals, and the terrible heat caused cracks to appear on the white bone palace. Roar. Under the threat of death, the Ghoul King let out a low roar full of bestiality. It could no longer maintain its human appearance. Its body involuntarily bent, and at the same time sharp fangs appeared. It looked like a fierce ghoul ready to pounce on its prey. Behind it, the gorgeous robe was covered with strange energy. This was the Magic Mouth Cloak, an evil equipment that could attack the enemy. The Ghoul King had the ability to hunger and rage, which could greatly increase its combat power. It also had the power to awaken the undead, but at present this ability was useless. Dor-Isen had just tried to summon the undead, and these undead were quickly burned by Sauron's body of flame. No one could defeat the Baelor Lord with cannon fodder. Even if there were thousands of cannon fodder, they were nothing but dust in front of Sauron. They would all die if they got close to him. The Ghoul King's body was being burned by the flames. The undead were naturally afraid of fire. During the battle with Sauron, Dor-Isen, the King of Ghouls, was constantly in the fire. He could only use evil aura to protect himself from the fire. Boom. The confrontation between the two demon overlords began in an instant. Sauron's huge body stood motionless, while the Ghoul King's figure was sent flying. Crushing power. As a gigantic otherworldly life form, perhaps only giant dragons could withstand Sauron's crushing power. Sauron didn't care about the spells flying toward him. He just opened up a negative energy shield and stood in place to resist the enemy's attacks. His strength was far beyond that of the Ghoul King, not to mention that he could borrow the power of his main body. There were no accidents in this battle, but it would take some time for it to end. Outer Islands, Mordor City. After spending about 3 days, the construction of a somewhat special temple was completed. A lot of resources had been allocated to the construction of this temple. Not only had a large number of witches and golems been used, but the city hall had also allocated a lot of manpower and resources. The temple covered an area of about 5 acres. In front of him was a small courtyard with a fountain in the middle. The pillars of the temple were made of 1-meter thick marble, and on both sides stood a pair of black cat sculptures. The eyes were carved with precious stones and looked very lifelike. There were no murals inside the temple. These were all completed by the priests later on. In the middle of the temple was a prayer altar, and in front of it was a statue of a cute cat-human girl. That was right. This was Lulu's temple. As Sauron's vassal god, her shrine was built on the right side of the giant god temple, like a satellite that protected the main shrine. Currently, Lulu's church was very small. It only had about 100 or 200 people. Some of them were creatures who were being guided, while the others were mortals who served. Lulu didn't have many responsibilities. But in the underworld, there was a team of death servants at her disposal. Her current main task was to ensure that the souls reached the underworld. When the temple was completed, Sauron had also come here and left his mark here with his blessing. Because she was Sauron's vassal god, some of his believers' faith would be transferred here when they prayed and sacrificed. Most of the vassal gods didn't have a large church, so part of their divine power relied on the main god. For now, Lulu's learning progress was very fast. She could already bestow level 1 to 5 divine spells to priests. But as a new god, she still needed a long time to grow. When she could bestow level 1 to 8 divine spells to her believers, Lulu would be truly qualified. Under normal circumstances, unless one was a god's chosen or a god's chosen, they couldn't use divine spells above level 9. If a believer's strength was close to legendary, then a god with weak divine power would basically turn them into a god's chosen. This was because these believers were incomparably important to them. Bottomless Abyss, 421st floor, White Kingdom. Along with the Ghoul King Dorasan's unwilling roar, his body turned into charcoal in the fire. Countless divine light appeared, most of it poured into Sauron's body, while a small part flew to the others. The Ghoul King Dorasan's domain was chaos, evil, illusion, trickery, and hunger. The power of chaos was repelled by Sauron, and the power of evil was absorbed by him. The same was true for illusion, and trickery was integrated into Sauron's body. As for hunger, it was completely repelled by the surviving ghouls. After that, the ghouls who had obtained divinity began to frantically escape. This demon lord couldn't bring Sauron too many benefits. Because of the repelling power, Sauron only obtained a new domain, trickery. As for the other powers, most of them were absorbed by the demons, especially the chaos domain, which was the dominant one. Some of the nearby demons even advanced. "Raise this place." Sauron frowned and withdrew his sword. Then he ordered, "Kill all the ghouls. Prepare to restore the abyss blood pool." The demon incarnation had accumulated a lot of divine power. These powers had not yet been integrated into the main body. Only when Sauron felt that the time was right, when the main body and the demon incarnation were reintegrated, the divine power would merge. After the complete integration, the demon incarnation was like an avatar. It could act alone or cooperate with the main body like the Queen of Spiders and the Lady of Night. Now, the Ghoul King had been eliminated. Sauron's next target was the Gnoll King Yeenagu. However, before he started, he still needed to win over an important ally. Chapter 1099. Bottomless Abyss, Forgotten Land. In a magnificent and huge palace, teams of demon guards were patrolling. From inside the huge palace came the obscene sounds of succubus maids, but these demon guards all turned a blind eye. This was different from humans. The reproduction of demons did not rely on mating to complete, and the same principle applied to devils. Therefore, mating in the lower planes was a kind of entertainment, and it was entertainment that only high-grade demons could enjoy. But even so, not all demons enjoyed this sport. They were more keen on using killing and fighting to pleasure themselves. After all, the Tanar'ri demons that now ruled the bottomless abyss were born from greed, destruction, lust, killing, rage, and other emotions. Inside the palace was a super big bed that was nearly 20 meters long. It was covered with soft fur and silk. Ordinary fabrics could not withstand Sauron's tossing. These furs came from ferocious demonic beasts, and the silk was made from the spider silk of the pit purgatory black spider. It had to be said that the spider silk produced in the kingdom of the Queen of Spiders had always been a high-end product in the lower planes. It was traded to the demon lords and archdevils through the demons. 7 or 8 beautiful succubus were lazily lying around the big bed. And the one who was serving Sauron was the succubus lord, Rhiannon. As the first succubus to serve Sauron, she was now a secondary demon lord who ruled over more than 300,000 square kilometers of land. Her status was second only to the red shroud of the bottomless abyss. "Master." Rhiannon knelt at Sauron's feet and whispered, "Are you really going to see Cridiana? She doesn't seem to be trustworthy." Sauron looked down at the succubus lord at his feet, smiled and shook his head and said, "I don't want to see her." Succubus had always been like this. After all, they were succubus Tanar'ri demons born from lust. Rhiannon was afraid that Sister Glory would threaten her position, so when she learned that Sauron was going to see her, she felt uneasy. Sauron did not want to see Sister Radiance. He wanted to see the succubus queen Mechanut. As a demon god who became a god through lust and taboos, Mechanut was also affected by the Avatar crisis. As a succubus who was not good at head-on fighting, she was smart enough to hide in a safe place. That was the Forgotten Land. Sauron got up and walked out of the palace. Succubus maids would clean up the messy battlefield inside. Soon, groups of demon guards gathered and followed Sauron to the arena. After taking over the White Kingdom, Sauron's territory spanned across 3 levels. It was very difficult for one person to manage such a large territory, so Sauron enfeoffed over a dozen lesser demon lords. These demon lords helped Sauron manage the territory while regularly handing over a portion of their souls and offerings according to the rules. Sauron assigned the territory according to the order of the human kingdom. He did not care about the size of the territory. What he wanted was more demon troops. Thousands of hired demon guards followed Sauron to Sister Glory's territory. After such a long time, the steel fortress here had been rebuilt. Although the strength of the Succubus Legion had been divided, it was still a powerful force in the bottomless abyss. Sister Radiance, Cridiana, welcomed Sauron's arrival. In the face of Sauron, who had become a demon overlord and ruled 3 levels, Cridiana also bowed her head to express her respect. "I want to talk to you in private." Sauron waved his hand to signal the demon guards behind him to retreat, then glanced at Cridiana and the higher succubus maids behind her. The expressions of the 2 succubus changed slightly. Then the other demons retreated, leaving only the 3 of them. "Should I call you the Queen of Succubus, Mechanut?" Sauron's expression had a hint of playfulness, and his eyes fell on the higher succubus behind Cridiana. The other party's identity was exposed early on. But Sauron did not have the strength to show his cards to her in the past, and now he had no fear. Giggle? The higher succubus standing behind Cridiana let out a chuckle, then her figure changed. A mature and gorgeous succubus with long black hair wearing a silk robe appeared in front of him. She was more seductive than the other succubus. There was always a playful smile on her red lips, as if she did not care about anything. Behind her was a tail with sharp barbs. She was the Queen of Succubus, Mechanut. After thousands of years in the abyss, she gradually grew from a small succubus lord to a demon giant. Caution was her motto. Even if it was the Avatar crisis, she had successfully passed through it safely. The Radiant sister, Credina, stood behind Mechanut. Now that the cards had been laid out, the next step was a deal between the 2 demon giants. As the daughter of Mechanut, she had no right to speak. Mechanut was a special existence. She doted on the succubus and could even tolerate the willfulness of succubus, but she was cruel to other demons. The succubus queen loved to play and abuse her enemies. She was an extremely dangerous and seductive demon lord. "Honorable Baelor Lord, Your Excellency Sauron." Mechanut bowed slightly to express her respect, and at the same time she showed her best curves. As the Queen of Succubus, she was born to know how to seduce males. She smiled and said, "Congratulations on defeating the King of Ghouls, Dorison. Now, your territory can be counted on one hand in the bottomless abyss." Sauron smiled without the slightest pride, as if he didn't care about these results at all, but said seriously, "Your Excellency Mechanut, the Avatar crisis is about to end. Are you still going to hide here? You know, now is the time when your enemy is at his weakest. If you don't kill him now, it will take more than 1,000 years for you to have such a good opportunity." Mechanut's enemy. That was naturally the King of Gnolls, Yeenagu. Sorin had killed the King of Ghouls, Dorison, which was equivalent to cutting off Yeenagu's most powerful claws. The ultimate purpose of his trip was, of course, to persuade the Queen of Succubus to send troops to attack Yeenagu, the King of Gnolls. Hearing Sauron's words, the Queen of Succubus, Mechanut's face changed slightly. Then she smiled and spread out her hands and said, "As you can see, Your Excellency Sauron, my strength has been greatly reduced. My children thought that I had fallen, and now they have divided my army. I'm just a lone wolf now, and I can only control such a succubus army. I'm afraid it will be difficult to help Your Excellency destroy Yeenagu." "Cunning bitch." Sauron's mouth twitched, then he smiled and said, "Your Excellency Mechanut is joking. Who doesn't know that you secretly control a powerful demon-absorbing army? On the 570th floor of the abyss, as far as I know, there is a huge half-demon army there." Hearing Sauron's words, Mechanut's face finally changed slightly. Because he casually pointed out 2 of Mechanut's biggest trump cards, and these were also important guarantees for her to regain her power. "P.S. I'm back." Resume the update. Chapter 1100. Mechanthus was definitely the most difficult bitch to deal with in the multiverse. She had many lovers over the long years. In addition to the fallen Demogorgon, there were also Pazuzu. Between them there were many powerful succubus descendants, including the mysterious Red Shroud who ruled the region, Mestville, the king of the patrolling hunters, the owner of Mechanthus's steel fortress Van Ellen in the first layer of the abyss, Pazunia, and Sokos Benoist, the embodiment of lust and taboo. He coveted the throne of Graz, ZT, and formed an alliance with Mechanthus in order to achieve this goal. In the end he was killed by Mechanthus. This was also the source of Mechanthus's current priesthood. This succubus queen was definitely not trustworthy, but in order to deal with Yeenagu, Sauron also needed her strength. Mechanthus could not help but fall into silence when she heard Sauron's words. Sauron knew that Mechanthus was tempted and immediately said, "Yeenagu is very close to your territory. If you don't kill him while he is weak, he will continue to harass and attack your territory in the future. As long as you defeat him, I can promise you half of the spoils, including his territory." The benefits promised by Sauron were like the last straw that broke the balance. Mechanthus finally raised her head and showed a charming smile. She clapped her hands gently and said, "I agree. You're right, this is indeed a rare opportunity." Clap, clap, clap. There was a crisp clap, and then a white portal appeared. "At your service, Your Excellency Succubus Queen." A huge meatball appeared in front of them. It was an eye demon that exuded a dangerous aura and a weak divinity. Her eye root was different from all the other eye demons because she was an advanced eye demon observer. Her creature level was close to level 30, which was more powerful than many secondary demon lords in the abyss. The eye demon observer had a special space power that could easily teleport in the abyss. It glanced at Sauron next to it and then flew in front of Mekhinut. It was Mekhinthet's think tank and also Mekhinthet's military governor. The eye demon observer helped her monitor her kingdom and legion, and was careful to be vigilant against those who had bad intentions. Mekhinthet was smart enough not to use the succubus as a military governor. The eye demon observer not only monitored the other succubus, but also the Radiance nuns. "Gather my half-demon army." Mekhinthet glanced at Sauron and said, "It's time for Yeenagu to pay the price for what he did in the past." In the bottomless abyss, benefits were the only thing that mattered. Sauron convinced Mekhinut, and she also believed that the two powerful demon lords would completely eliminate the enemy. "Very good." Sauron stretched out his hand with a smile and said, "Then, we only need to recruit one more target. Who else should he rope in?" Mekhinthet just thought for a moment and knew who it was. The old enemy of the Knoll King, Yeenagu, the Tauren King, Buffett, the demon lord of the 600th floor of the abyss, and the monarch of the Purgatory Tauren. His followers and servants were mainly Taurens and trolls. A demon lord who was not powerful but had fought with Yeenagu for thousands of years. When Yeenagu was still weak, he could not destroy Buffett, the Tauren King. But when Yeenagu was strong enough to destroy him, Buffett, the Tauren King's secret supporter, also appeared. That was the terrible Tsang Yi, the mother of demons in the bottomless abyss. She was the mother of many demon lords, including the Dark Monarch, the Shadow Demon Queen, and so on. In the Scroll of Darkness of Oman, she was called the mother of the entire Tanari race, but this was not recognized by many demon lords. One thing for sure was that Tsang Yi liked to seduce powerful demons and find ways to give birth to offspring. The number of these offspring was huge, but not many survived. Among them, only 3 to 5 became demon lords. Through Tsang Yi, the Tauren King Buffett came into contact with the even more ancient demon lord, Chrysalis Sovereign. After spending some time with the Chrysalis Sovereign, Buffett built the Tower of Jurisprudence and began to cultivate and create a unique demon that he came up with. Legend has it that it was a mutated bull demon. Buffett, the Tauren King, had always wanted to join forces with Mekhinthet because of his hatred for Yeenagu. But for some unknown reason, Mekhinthet rejected him several times, so the Tauren King Buffett gradually gave up on this idea. "Do you want to pull Buffett, the Tauren King?" Mekhinthet frowned and murmured, "He is a good chess piece and helper. However, I hate Mother Night who is standing behind him." Sure enough, it was because of Tsang Yi. Sauron also heard that Buffett, the Tauren King, tried to form an alliance with Mekhinthet to deal with Yeenagu, but Mekhinthet refused several times. The reason was the same as Sauron guessed. The Succubus Queen did not like Tsang Yi, the ancient demon. Tsang Ye's real body was hidden under the shroud. It looked like a delicate woman's body, but in fact, Tsang Ye's real body was so terrifying that her body refused to accept herself. Anyone who opened the shroud and wanted to see the real face of the Mother of Demons had to make a fortitude exemption of more than 34 difficulty. Success meant that before he saw the real face, another strand of fluttering shroud covered the gap. Failure meant that he saw the truth and died on the spot. Sauron was not interested in why Mekhinthet hated Tsang Yi. He just looked at the Succubus Queen in front of him and said slowly, "Yeenagu is much stronger than before. He stole the power of the demon Orbis, and as far as I know, he got a very dangerous artifact. We need more cannon fodder." Yeenagu's own power was not strong in the abyss. But Yeenagu was a lucky guy. There was a very ancient demon Orbis on his level, a half-dead ancient demon lord. Yeenagu rose quickly and collected a very powerful artifact. That was Flail of Time. This artifact had a total of 5 heads. Sorin got 2 of them and gave them to his saint necromancer, Milan, but the other 3 heads had fallen into the hands of Yeenagu. This made Yeenagu's combat power greatly increased. In a head-on battle, almost no one could withstand the crushing attack of the Flail of Time. Fortunately, he had only obtained 3 heads. If he had obtained all 5 heads, the Flail of Time would have completely surpassed Pale Justice and the Holy Avenger in terms of pure lethality in melee combat. To some extent. The complete version of the Flail of Time was the artifact with the highest damage in the material plane, the most stable damage and the most damage attributes. Poison, fire, ice, electricity, acid. During the period when the Son of Massacre was active, the +5 Flail of Time was the artifact with the highest damage in close combat. Chapter 1101. The 600th Floor of the Abyss. Persuading Bafeman, the Tauren King, was easier than Solon imagined. This demon lord had hated Yeenegu, the Knoll King, for thousands of years, so when there was a chance to completely destroy this enemy, he agreed without any hesitation. Especially after Yeenegu's strength grew and often invaded his territory, the Tauren King Buffett had already thought of a counterattack while Yeenegu's strength was weakened. The Minotaur King was 12 feet tall when he stood up. His body was bulky and huge. His muscles were exaggerated under his thick black hair. His head looked like a demonic bull's head. His huge, forward-curving horns were stained with the blood of countless victims. His hoof-like feet and a bull-like tail made his beast-like appearance even more ferocious. This Tauren King was not a very powerful demon lord. However, his challenge rating was also level 24. Defeating him was about the same as fighting an ancient dragon alone. He rarely left his maze. At most, he would send out his avatar. Therefore, the challenge rating to kill him should be around level 30. This demon lord created Bray, Tauren, and Tauren. To some extent, he was not as weak as he looked on the surface. He had the ability to extract his own blood and recreate new demon species like Sauron created the demon hunters. The Tauren King Buffett's voice was dull and heavy. He was a demon lord full of fighting desire. Perhaps he was a demon born from anger. Because he and the race he created had violent power, there were a large number of barbarians among the followers of the Tauren King Buffett. "I agree to your alliance agreement," the Tauren King Buffett said in a deep voice. Sauron proposed a temporary alliance. They swore by the river Styx to deal with Yeenegu together, and the spoils of war would be distributed according to the results of the battle. In order to ensure that everyone had their own gains after defeating Yeenegu, they would divide the levels into 3 pieces. Sauron's burly body looked taller than the Tauren King Buffett. The Baelor itself was one of the largest demons in the abyss. He nodded with satisfaction and said, "Very good. Then you can prepare to gather your own army. We will attack in 3 days." They had to kill Yeenegu as soon as possible. This was because the army of the Bator Inferno had begun to move. Although the outer regions of the material plane were still considered peaceful, there seemed to be frequent devil activity in other places. The final wave of impact was about to arrive. The true elites of the devils had yet to appear, and the ones that appeared now were just small fries. When the devils confirmed that the strength of the material plane had plummeted, the army of devils that had occupied most of the 10,000 abyss planes on the first level of the abyss would be mobilized. By then they would only leave a small part of their army to guard the place, while the rest would go to the material plane to wage war. Sauron must kill Yeenegu. In this way he could smoothly take over the steel fortresses controlled by Yeenegu on the first and second layers of the abyss. As for Yeenegu's original territory, he did not care much about it. The 422nd level of the bottomless abyss was still too low. Sauron's Order Evil faction wasn't suitable for occupying too deep a level. The higher the level in the bottomless abyss, the bigger it would be. At the same time, it would be easier to accommodate creatures from other factions. Most of the evil demons were active in the first 50 levels of the bottomless abyss. They wouldn't go any further than that unless it was an important transaction. Time passed very quickly. In the distant city of Moder, when the army of devils in the Golumba arena began to gather, a huge beheading sword finally took shape in the Temple of Moder. Soul Slayer, Dark Demon Sword. Endless death aura emanated from this supergiant beheading sword. It was integrated with the power of the Staff of Orcus, and at the same time, it was recast by Sorin with divinity. Its weight reached an astonishing 2 tons. When it was swung, it was like a heavy mortar. It could easily destroy a city wall that was several meters thick. This divine artifact was endowed with the power of the Lord of Death. The enemies killed by it could be resurrected as undead. At the same time, it also had the power to imprison souls. The number of souls imprisoned could reach about 3,000. When charged to a certain extent, the imprisoned souls would become vengeful spirits and be released to bite the enemy. At the same time, it could also awaken a group of 50 skeleton warriors. This was a divine artifact made by Sorin himself, and only the devil incarnation could use it. Before attacking Yeenegu, he sent this divine artifact to the bottomless abyss. The 422nd floor of the bottomless abyss. Because the territory of Dor-Isen, the king of ghouls, had been taken, 421st floor, Sauron could easily lead the devil army directly to Yeenegu's territory. The king of gnolls, Yenegu's biggest dream was to see his people, the gnolls, prosper. He imagined a main material plane controlled by his people, where elves, humans, dwarves and halflings were just slaves and food for the gnolls. However, he knew that the gnolls in the main material plane could not achieve this goal, so he strongly supported the believers of other races who worshipped him. The leader of the mysterious Morway family was once one of his most powerful human believers at that time, but under the planning of the succubus queen, Mechanut, the family was destroyed in an internal strife. From that day on, the king of gnolls, Yenegu regarded the succubus queen as his greatest enemy and periodically attacked the territory of the succubus queen. Today, the king of gnolls, Yenegu, was facing a huge challenge. Because outside the ancient city of Yenegu, a huge army appeared in front of him. The Purgatory Tauren army from the 600th floor of the Bottomless Abyss, the half-succubus army from the 570th floor of the Bottomless Abyss, and the Devil army from the 3rd floor of the Bottomless Abyss. It was a little different from the other floors of the Bottomless Abyss. The ancient city of Yenegu had a large number of human slaves, which were all obtained by the king of gnolls from other planes. This was a very smart and far-sighted demon lord. About 2,000 years ago he had been keeping humans, dwarves, elves, halflings and other races in captivity. These were all races that accidentally entered the Bottomless Abyss and were bewitched into the abyss. Yenegu turned them into slaves and kept them in captivity. At the same time he found ways to let these slaves gradually reproduce, and the largest number of them were humans. He enslaved these human slaves with cruel rule. Almost every year some human slaves died and these dead people were food for the gnolls. Only in rare cases would Yenegu reward the gnolls with living human slaves, and these human slaves often did not live long. He kept other races in captivity for the gnolls as slave labor and as rations for the gnolls. Chapter 1102. The 422nd layer of the Abyss, the Dark Prairie. Yenegu, the king of gnolls, occupied this place and built the city of Yenegu here. The building that was the size of a human city was placed on a massive stone roller, allowing it to roam the entire plane, guided by thousands of slaves plundered from the prime material plane and other planes. According to rough estimates, this palace would cruise in a counterclockwise direction to the 3 permanent campsites in this area every year, stopping near the dormant Obilus demon Lord Beshar's huge body, so that Yenegu could have a telepathic discussion with it, and finally replace the slaves who died in the overwork of dragging the capital of this layer at the Gathering Gate. Most of the dead slaves became rations for the gnolls. The entire city of Yenegu would move in a counterclockwise direction. However, this city belonged to the king of gnolls. In addition, there were 3 permanent campsites on this level, where a large number of slaves and gnolls were kept. Master. A tall succubus maid descended from the sky and whispered to Sauron, Yenegu, the king of gnolls, has moved his city to Barchid's End. A large number of gnolls and slave legions have gathered there. He seems to want to fight us there. Barchid's End. When he heard this name, Sauron's face changed slightly. The king was because this was the body of an incomparably
There were
ancient
huge slave markets in these
places. This huge body could always think of ways to capture slaves from other giant whale stranded on a beach. The succubus queen and the Minotaur king chose a place to deal with us. There was only one place left except for the Yenegu city. Appeared and that was the gate of assembly. The rise of Yenegu this level was heavily guarded, and it was also Yenegu's most important stronghold. Anyone who is close to Barchid. The gate of assembly was Storm Lord had a very terrifying power when he was alive. It allowed two-way access to many main material planes known to Yenegu. The structure of this plane. Not only the material plane where Sauron's body was, of course, but also the origin of the Obilus as well as other material planes, but this was not a reason such as the hometown of Mordenkainen. He looked at the succubus queen and teleportation portal that took countless energy and wealth to build, for a permanent and it preserved many and eventually gathered the army to attack Barchid's End. Who belonged to the evil church of territory on this level would be transported to the realm of Yenegu and other dangerous predators in the vicinity, would either join the greedy undead creatures belonging to the magnificent Dorison, or even the Howling Peaks, be thrown into the wilderness as food for those demon-like beasts. Fallen, the gnolls were a creature that reproduced in many planes. He had been exploiting Dorison surplus Yenegu could lock many planes through his believers. At this level, one of his advantages. Thousands of ghouls the to gate help of assembly held a large number of troops. However, it was clear that the territory had mobilized wild gnolls, coyotes, carrion-eating coyotes to the death, as well as many violent beasts gathering. Easily occupied there were several important locations, and the price he paid was only the death of about 30,000 low-level demons. Ruins, shrieking peaks, Sauron, who now controlled many levels of the bottomless abyss, sacrificing tens of thousands of low-level demons was nothing. Because his demon army was replenishing tens of thousands of troops every day. If he wanted, Sauron could gather millions of demons in an instant. These low-level demons could only be used as cannon fodder. They were not very useful, and it was not cost-effective to bring them across plains. Is this the Gate of Assembly? Sauron came to the huge circular portal. He felt the aura of space. This portal had existed before Yennegu became a demon lord. According to his judgment, it should have been built by the older Orbis demons. At that time, the powerful Orbis demons liked to invade other planes very much. There were more than a dozen plane waymarks in the portal. 3 of them were connected to material planes, namely the main material plane, the origin of the Orc's Gate, and Mordenkainen's home. Mordenkainen was a legendary mage who liked to wander. The spells created by him were spread across many planes. He was a wizard who could rival the gods, although no one knew where he was wandering in the multiverse. Sauron let the demon army occupy this place. Then he recorded the space waymarks of this ancient portal. There were more than 30 planes connected to it. Except for the upper planes that could not be reached, almost all the lower planes as well as many astral planes and material planes. Such a portal could not be built by Yennegu. He only used this ancient portal to help himself plunder slaves from other planes, which was why Yennegu had a large number of human slaves. Other material planes? Sauron looked at the huge portal in front of him and murmured, "Maybe it will be useful in the future." It was not easy to spread faith across planes, because it was extremely easy to arouse the hostility of other gods. The Queen of Spiders was a successful propagator of faith across planes, but this was only because she was a god of her race. As long as there were drows in the plane, there would be her faith. This was difficult for other gods to replicate. Gods crossing planes often led to terrible wars such as the fall of Muhammad, the Battle of the Orc's Gate, the destruction of the ill-made empire, and so on. However, this was not impossible for Sauron because he was the Lord of Death. If he spent more energy to spread faith to other planes, it would not be difficult. The soul would eventually return to the river Styx. P.S. Not today. That's all. Chapter 1103. Countless coyotes were torn apart by the demons. The low-level demons tore the flesh and blood of these beasts. They were all raised on the grassland by Yennegu and were also used to cultivate wild gnolls. The laws of this plane were also changed by Yennegu. This was the home of the gnolls. The demons themselves could not dominate. Yennegu used a special method to select the strong from the wild gnolls and then transform them into purgatory gnolls. The real abyss gnolls were gathered near the ancient city of Yennegu, and there were also a large number of human slaves. The gnolls liked human flesh and blood very much, so Yennegu would find ways to rob a large number of human slaves from the material plane every year. The Gathering Gate was originally a very important portal, but in the end, it was used for such a low-level purpose. Sauron left a 30,000 demon army to guard the Gathering Gate, and then led the army to the ancient city of Yennegu. For now, the ancient city of Yennegu stopped at the end of Barchid. Long before Yennegu dominated this plane, this was the domain of the Storm Lord, the demon of Obylis, Barchid. Although the betrayal of the demon Tana-Ri finally cut off Barchid's connection with this plane and squeezed his vitality out of his huge lifeless shell, the pain of Obylis' death had lasted for countless years. Now this huge and strange demon was similar to a twisted beached whale, unable to move on its own, and could only be exposed to the scorching sun of this plane. Again and again the coastal rock formations that supported his half-dead body were shattered by violent hurricanes and acid rain. Barchid's once perfect control of the weather was inadvertently triggered by the unbearable pain of slow death. Although he could no longer speak, Barchid still retained a fragment of his once vast consciousness. If he communicated through telepathy, he would talk in a slow and melancholy tone about an era long before the birth of Tana-Ri, about the rise and fall of the oldest demons. A trusted frequent visitor might even overhear Barchid's narration that demons didn't originate from the bottomless abyss. Instead, they migrated here from another place after abandoning their evil creator race that had already disappeared into the river of history. Yennegu was curious and surprised by these legends, even if he did not fully understand their importance. For a long time, the Gnoll Lord had modified the route of the mobile fortress and made it a yearly trek so that he could talk to the dying demon Obylis. This was a space where the laws had been changed by a powerful force. There was such a saying in the multiverse. The gods of order created the world and the demons came uninvited. The third generation of Tana-Ri demons were the Aborigines. They were born from the desire of humans extracted by the Orbis demon. In the ancient war, the Tana-Ri demons won and replaced the Orbis demon to gain the ruling power of the abyss. However, over the long years there were still some Orbis demons left. In the boundless astral world, there were also enormous corpses left behind from the battle between the oldest order ancient gods and the earliest demons. These ancient god corpses floated in the astral world, occasionally giving birth to the incomparably powerful Wumians. Bakhard was an Orbis demon who was on the brink of death. He was already dead. But no matter what, he didn't seem to be completely dead. Part of Bachard's ancient memories still remained, and he could use telepathy to communicate with some intelligent creatures. He was the Storm Lord. Even among the demons of Orbis, it was extremely powerful. Now, its body was exposed on this level and it was impossible to calculate how huge it was. It could only be judged based on the exposed body. Even the 100-armed giant was just a little guy in front of it. He was like a beached giant whale. Part of his body had been covered by rock formations over the long years. The power emitted by this ancient Orbis demon changed the climate of this space, making it often shrouded in strong winds and acid rain. Yenego was the only visitor here. Since gaining the ruling power of this level, Yenego was wary of anyone approaching Bachard's body. When Sauron's army arrived, they felt the power of a terrible storm. The dark clouds shrouded the earth as if something terrible was brewing. This was the original demon. He came from another world, fought with the gods of order, and created the abyss. But fortunately he was already dead. It was just that this kind of existence was very difficult to die completely, just like the corpse of the ancient gods. But it was also very dangerous because it was difficult for creatures of this level to die completely. The consciousness of the Orbis demon lord was still there. The pain of his death had lasted for tens of thousands of years, but even so, part of his consciousness still appeared from time to time. The situation is a bit wrong. Mekanthet's figure appeared, looking at the ancient city of Yenego in front of him, and murmured, "He seems to have some conspiracy waiting for us." Soren nodded but still said, "There is no other choice in this case. Get ready to attack." They had already come to the door of Yenego. No matter what the conspiracy was, they could only face it head-on. There was only one chance. With the dull sound of war drums, hundreds of thousands of demons began to rush in. In the ancient city of Yenego, countless gnolls were stationed in it, but they had no intention of moving at all. Suddenly, the whole world changed drastically, accompanied by some kind of powerful force. Lightning flashed across the dark clouds, followed by raging winds. A huge tornado appeared in front of Sauron's eyes. It had formed in an instant, and then thousands of demons were sucked into it. The weak ones were torn to pieces, and the strong ones were swept to an unknown place. 3 giant tornadoes appeared in front of them. They guarded the surroundings of the ancient city of Yenego. As soon as they appeared, they brought tens of thousands of casualties to Sauron's coalition army. This was the power of nature. In the face of such a terrible natural disaster, even the high-grade demons would find it difficult to resist. It's the power of the Storm Lord. Mekanthet's expression was very ugly and he said, "In this case we can't get close to the ancient city of Yenego. Do you have any way to eliminate this terrible tornado?" Sauron did not speak. But the next moment, a golden figure was projected in the sky. His light pierced the dark clouds. The giant looked down at the ancient city of Yenego in front of him. In the eyes of the Gnoll King full of horror, he directly grabbed the giant tornado in front of him with his bare hands. The power that made all the demons tremble shrouded the space. Even Mekanthus could not help but tremble. The 300-foot-tall golden giant was not a physical entity. It was just an incarnation of a god, but its appearance made countless demons tremble in fear. The powerful power of divinity sealed the space. Under the palm of the golden giant, the terrible tornado in front of him was caught like a toy, and then disappeared in the sky. Change reality. Power of divinity. Chapter 1104. A Great Divine Power. For a moment, countless thoughts flashed through the mind of the Queen of Succubus, Mekanut, but in the end, she did not do anything. The power shown by Soren's body shocked these demons and made them fear the gods. The Lord of the Dead was the master of the underworld. Now, even the Queen of Spiders, Lolth, did not dare to face Soren alone, let alone the Queen of Succubus, Mekanut, because there was almost no chance of winning. After obtaining the throne of the Lord of the Dead, Soren's identity was already at the level of the main god of a divine system. Now, all he needed to do was to wait for the Avatar crisis to pass. As long as the Avatar crisis passed safely, then he would be one of the most powerful main gods of the human divine system. Even the god of light could not do anything to him. Even if Bakhard was alive, he might not be Soren's opponent, let alone Bakhard, who was not completely dead yet. Sauron's body used the power of changing reality to forcibly erase the divine power from the Storm Lord that Yenego mobilized. This made the ancient city of Yenego like a naked woman in front of a group of fierce big men. Countless demons who were demoralized a moment ago suddenly became excited, and thousands of demons charged towards the ancient city of Yeenagu. The king of gnolls did not retreat. As a rapidly rising demon lord, he could fight to the last moment to protect his position and ideals. Yeenagu was a demon lord with ideals. Since he became a demon lord, he had only worked for one purpose, and that was the prosperity of the gnolls. In the best case, all races such as humans, dwarves, elves, halflings and so on were slaves and food of the gnolls. He had been fighting for this all his life, fighting for the rise of the gnolls. So, even in the face of the demon army several times, no gnolls in the ancient city of Yeenagu retreated. This was an incredible scene. But the reality was like this. The gnolls tried to make this the holy land of their race because only at this level the gnolls were the masters. They could freely dominate and enslave other races, and they could use humans, dwarves, elves and halflings as rations. Yeenagu had always been regarded as the supreme king by the gnolls. Of course, this was only within their race. For any other race, even demons, Yeenagu was a fierce and brutal demon lord, and his servants hunted all living creatures. This was an unprecedentedly bitter battle. Even Sauron had never encountered such a tenacious enemy. Countless gnolls stepped forward to block the attack of the demon army. They did not even have the slightest thought of retreating. They stubbornly guarded the castle that was stained with the blood of countless humans, demons, dwarves, elves and other races. Yeenagu stood on the front line with 3 shackles in his hand. There were already many corpses of high-level demons around him. He roared like a wolf, but he never thought of taking a step back. If he wanted to, he could escape. But from then on he would be like a stray dog, never able to take back his territory. Therefore Yeenagu chose to fight to the death. As the ruler of the gnolls, he could not give up everything. In this world, good and evil, right and wrong were not so absolute. Every year, Yeenagu plundered and killed thousands of humans from other worlds, but among the gnolls he was the king who was absolutely respected and worshipped. It's time to end all this. The figure of the Tauren king appeared. The tall and burly him led a group of giant bull demons to join the battle. The hatred between him and Yeenagu had lasted for countless years. There were few places in the abyss where one could eat beef, so the second favorite food of the gnolls was the torrents. Yeenagu's servants liked to attack the believers of the Tauren king very much, and the agile gnolls often had the upper hand in the battle. Thousands of bull demons and giant bull demons joined the battlefield with battle axes. They charged fanatically to vent their hatred and anger. The descendants of succubus and humans also began to advance. Mekanthet tempted a large number of humans, and many of them had descendants with succubus. These half-demons were one of the main forces of the succubus queen. Go! Sauron waved his hand, and groups of fire demons also joined the battle. The destruction of Yeenagu was inevitable. Sauron could not allow Yeenagu to stop him. No matter what his position was among the gnolls, he must crush him. The real main force joined the battlefield. The burly bull demons and the fire demons attacked both sides of the city of Yeenagu. Thousands of gnolls fell to the ground under the attack, and Yeenagu was also covered in blood at the moment. The Tauren king's anger for thousands of years made him burst out with amazing combat power. The two sides had fought hundreds of rounds and he was injured all over. Sauron finally made his move. Accompanied by surging flames, his huge body fell from the sky. Mekanthet just watched from a distance, his eyes shining with an unknown light, and no one knew what he was planning. Clang! The Soul Slayer's giant sword and the year's flail burst into dazzling flames. Fortunately, the other party did not get all the year's flail, which gave Sauron a very obvious advantage. There were corpses of demons and gnolls all around. Sauron's attack was like a storm, relying on the advantage of the supergiant demon's body to suppress the enemy. He had the power from his body. Yeenagu himself was not strong, and his rise was inseparable from Bakhard. The fierce battle lasted for a long time. In the end, the body of the Gnoll king Yeenagu fell, and with his death, countless gnolls let out mournful wails. Then these gnolls began to scatter and flee. Their king had died, and the Gnoll kingdom would be destroyed. There would be no Gnoll kingdom in the bottomless abyss, and they could only flee like stray dogs. Cheers sounded. But it was not from the demons but from the enslaved mortals. After the battle broke out, human slaves began to rise up. They hated these gnolls more than the demons. This city that represented the glory of the gnolls had become the tomb of the gnolls. Their slaves included humans, demons, dwarves, elves, orcs and so on. Now these slaves quickly rebelled. Although they did not know how the victorious demons would treat them, it was better than being eaten by the gnolls. The war came to an end. The corpses of demons and gnolls were all visible to the naked eye. The Tauren king was extremely excited after defeating his old enemy for thousands of years. The cunning and shrewd succubus army had already cleaned up the battlefield. Sauron's burly body came to the huge corpse of Bakhard. He lowered his head and muttered a few words to himself. Then he clenched the huge Soul Slayer with both hands and stabbed into the body of the ancient Orbis demon who had not yet died. Chapter 11:05. If he was killed by Sauron, he would never be resurrected again. The death of Yennefer represented the end of the Gnolls. From today on, the Gnolls were no longer one of the powerful races in the Abyss. After losing the support of Yennefer, the Abyss Gnolls would soon be attacked by the demons and other races. The 422nd floor of the Abyss was not the territory that Sauron needed, so the demon incarnation gave up part of the benefits in the final distribution of benefits. He only retained the ownership of the Assembly Gate and sent a powerful demon army to guard it. The succubus queen got the reward she wanted and eliminated her longtime enemy, but she also needed to pay something, such as canceling a very important mark. Sauron won the respect of the Tauren king, but the law of the Abyss determined that it was difficult for the demon lords to unite completely. After eliminating Yennefer, Sauron's biggest gain was a large number of human slaves. He was not a philanthropist and it was impossible for him to let these humans go. So Sauron incorporated these humans and then found a way to transport them to the Forgotten Land on the 3rd floor of the Abyss. Humans were a little different from demons. Although they were weak, they were very malleable. There were many places where they could be used in the Forgotten Land, and humans were very good at construction. They could help Sauron perfect the Galumba arena. There were more than 10,000 humans in total. Some of them were simple slaves who had not received any education. They looked like barbarians. They could only be a group of coolies. The other part was plundered from other planes by the Gnoll king Yennefer. They were educated and had certain knowledge. They could assist the demons and goblins in managing and building territories. Sauron soon returned to the Forgotten Land. Then the demon army sent troops again and occupied all the military fortresses belonging to Yennefer from the 1st to the 5th floor of the Abyss. Then Sauron began to mobilize troops to the 10,000 Abyss Plain on the 1st floor of the Abyss. The Avatar crisis was about to end. The Devil's attack had begun in the material plane because Mordor City received information from Arendelle yesterday. The human dukedom near the southwest had been attacked by the Devil Legion. They had detonated a doomsday volcano and turned the dukedom into a land of lava. The Baator Inferno was filled with poisonous gas, fire, ice and hurricanes. Demons could adapt to such harsh climates, but it was difficult for humans to survive. This was the most effective way to harvest souls on a large scale, using natural disasters to eliminate humans. The final battle had arrived. No matter how much Sauron had changed history, the Lord of Hell, Asmodeus, still had to carry out his plan. And this time, regardless of success or failure, he would be the biggest beneficiary. The strength of the gods was destined to be greatly damaged after the Avatar crisis, and it would be impossible for them to recover without hundreds of years. Meanwhile, in the distant overseas area, the city of Mordor had also entered a state of alert. However, the situation was different from the past. All the battleships near Mordor City were dispatched to other places, and there were not many people in the entire port area. The population was hit to the inner city. At the same time, above the island of Mordor, a huge defensive shield had been activated, covering the entire island. Sauron had prepared for such a long time. The most critical and important step of Mordor City's plan was finally about to start. Countless residents gathered in the central square, while Sauron's believers gathered in front of the temple of the giant gods to pray. A large number of academic witches were gathered and mobilized everywhere. At the same time, thousands of golem puppets were in charge of various places. In the center of Mordor City, a towering arcane tower had been fully activated, and Thaling had activated the ultimate energy shield. Prepare to activate the Mies energy core. In the cold mechanical voice, Thaling's high-speed report sounded, activate the central super levitation ring. Activate the temple auxiliary levitation ring. Activate the defensive energy shield. Energy shield operating at 100%. Activate the elemental furnace. Activate the golem legion. Activate the detachment device. Rumble. The whole world seemed to shake and countless people screamed, but then more violent tremors broke out. On the periphery of the island of Mordor, especially in the port area, a large number of houses collapsed instantly. The world changed color. The violent tremors from the ground set off huge waves tens of meters high, but they were blocked by the energy shield of the island of Mordor. Countless mortals screamed in horror, and even the soldiers who had been on the battlefield for a long time could not help but turn pale. At this moment, they were frightened by the terrible changes in the world. Detachment complete. The whole violent tremor lasted for nearly half an hour. A huge whirlpool had formed under the island of Mordor, and the whole island had been protected by a powerful energy field. There was a flat fracture layer below, and then endless seawater surged towards the city of Mordor, and the whole huge island gradually rose into the air. 30 meters. The whole island of Mordor was separated from the land and rose 30 meters into the air. The violent tremors gradually subsided. People's faces showed an expression of relief, and then they exclaimed in disbelief. The island of Mordor flew up. The island was protected by an unprecedentedly huge defensive energy shield. It directly broke away from the continental shelf and slowly rose, and finally flew to a height of more than 300 meters. Detachment complete. Everything is normal. Thaling's cold voice sounded, and then there were cheers of excitement around the arcane tower. Thousands of witches cheered as if they had completed some unimaginable feat. Many people ran to the edge of the island curiously. They looked down at the sea under their feet. The place where the island of Mordor was originally located had been submerged by the sea. We're flying. The huge island of Mordor left a huge shadow on the sea. It began to advance in the direction of the mainland. There was no vibration during the whole process, and there was no strong wind inside. The defensive energy shield maintained an internal ecological balance, blocking all the wind and impact outside. We finally succeeded. Gloria's expression was uncontrollable joy. At this moment, Fallen Witch was even more excited. She was full of pride as she looked at everything in front of her. Years of hard work and effort had finally paid off. The island of Mordor had finally been transformed into a huge floating city by them. In other words, this was a floating fortress. Under the control of the central tower, the entire island of Mordor began to fly in the direction of the mainland. This process took 3 days. After 3 days, the island of Mordor would reach the south coast and eventually float in the southern area of the Wind Spear Hills. Soren looked down at all this from the clouds. He looked at Vivian and Lillian beside him and whispered, "I said it. We will go back one day." Chapter 11:06. A blood-red teleportation gate opened. Under the dark red sky, the whole world seemed to have a terrible crack. Through the crack of the plane one could see a terrible land. There was fire, poison gas, ice and hurricanes. It was a place that mortals were extremely afraid of. Even the most ferocious thugs could not guarantee that they could survive in this terrible land. The portal was directly connected to the Bator Inferno. After the portal gradually stabilized, countless hell creatures surged out from it. Hellcats, hellhounds, imps, chained devils, nightmares, demonic beasts, ghosts, babas, ananas, lustful devils, chirurgs, hamargs, Aussies and pit fiends. Asmodeus finally decided to attack the material plane. In just one day, a principality in the material plane was captured. Then the terrible power left a scar on the world. The whole land was polluted and transformed, turning into a hellish environment. Hundreds of thousands of devils destroyed a kingdom in just one day, and at the same time, pushed the front line into the territory of the elves and dwarves. This time it wasn't just the humans who suffered heavy losses. The Emerald Forest in the south had turned into a sea of fire, and less than a third of the 100,000 elves had fled to Dreamscape. The dwarves' hidden fortress in the mountains had been breached, and the powerful pit fiends had massacred the homes of the hill dwarves, the Grey Castle dwarves and the mountain dwarves. In the face of the terrible threat of the devils, many races had to retreat to the safety of the rear. At this time, there was only a short time left before the end of the Avatar Crisis. None of the gods knew when the Avatar Crisis would end. Maybe the terrible torrent of energy would disappear tomorrow, and they would return to their countries. Maybe it would take 10 days to half a month, then they would have to face the powerful Blood War Legion. The entire material plane's defensive line collapsed in just one day. No mortal could stop the advance of the devils, not even the most elite troops of the material plane. This was a terrible force composed entirely of elite troops with a challenge rating of 15 and above. Even the army of Mordor would be destroyed in an instant in front of them. The Frost Kingdom, Arendelle. Princess Royal had already sensed the arrival of the Devil's Blood battle army. She ordered her people to gather and head to Arendelle. At the same time, she gave up most of the towns and villages and stationed hundreds of thousands of troops near Ice River City. This was the final battle. Princess Royal used her divine power to raise a 150-meter-tall ice wall in Icewind Valley to block the advance of the demon army. At the same time, more than 5 million people had gathered around Arendelle. She tried her best to gather the people within her protection range. The same scene was playing out in various places. All the gods had a premonition that the Avatar crisis was about to pass. At this last moment, almost no gods were willing to fight with the devils. They gathered their churches and believers, and then set up lines of defense, waiting for the end of the Avatar crisis so that they could regain the powerful strength that gods could possess. As for the other mortals, they could only pray for their own good now. At this moment, the selfishness of the gods was completely exposed. Only a small number of gods were left to personally block the devil's attacks. Glorious City. When the blood battle army from Bator Inferno appeared, the whole city fell into high alert. Paladins and clergymen from all directions gathered spontaneously. In just a few days, more than 50,000 paladins and clergymen gathered here. An incomparably huge teleportation gate opened in the Shrine of Glory City. Then countless figures of angels appeared in it. In addition to many angels from Mountain Paradise, there were also the Skypiercer clan and the Yakong clan. These were the natives of the upper plane. The God of Light broke the space barrier with his divine power and seemed to summon an army of angels to block the terrible blood battle army. In this world there were no 3 million paladins who were not afraid of death. In the face of the terrible blood battle army, only the angels summoned by the God of Light with his own power could slightly stop the devil's footsteps. However, what Soren had done finally changed history. The terrible army of the devils was blocked in several places. Misty Forest. Tens of thousands of demons surrounded the forest, and countless demon corpses were piled up at the edge of the forest. However, they were unable to take a single step into the forest. Even the truly elite demon army was blocked outside the forest by countless Treants. Many high-level Treants flew in the misty forest. They used their own power to heal the creation of the Treant guards. More than 10 incomparably tall golden oaks had already arrived at the edge of the forest. Even if the third of the 8 demon generals of hell tried to take over this place, he was still repelled by some incomparably powerful divine power. He was severely injured and had to retreat dozens of kilometers away from the misty forest. This was the power of the Father of the Oak Tree. Soren awakened the remaining divine power of the Father of the Oak Tree, but he could not completely absorb it. This powerful divine power was left in the misty forest, and the high-level Treants who held the awakening ceremony with Soren could activate it. The entire misty forest was awakened by thousands of ancient war trees. In response to the call of the ancient wisdom tree, thousands of droll gathered here. At the same time there were also tree shepherds from the east. The entire misty forest became the last shelter in the devil's territory. It sheltered at least 300,000 intelligent creatures. The advance of the Bloody War army was not as fast as the archdevils expected. They encountered the snow puppet army created by the Princess Royal in Icewind Valley, the powerful ancient war trees in the misty forest, and the paladins with the Holy Avenger and Pale Justice in the Desolation Forest. These 3 places were like solid boulders, and they were able to withstand the pressure of the Devil Legion. At the same time, the witches from the Northern Tower also launched a counterattack. Soren provided them with the technology of the floating space tower, which made the Northern Tower's magic lock work again, covering the northern front of the Windspear Hills. The Devil Army was still advancing in the southern area, but the enemy in the northwest was like a fishbone in the throat, making the archdevils feel very uncomfortable. The Angel Army and the Bloody War Army fought a great battle in the Arthur Plains. Hundreds of thousands of troops were thrown into the battlefield. This was a large-scale battle for humans, but for the devils of the Bator Inferno, it was just an appetizer. Because this scale of battle was not worth mentioning at all for the bloody war in the bottomless abyss. The archdevils also had absolute confidence in defeating the enemy, they just needed to wait until the real elites of the Bloody War army were gathered. They needed to change the power of the law of the material plane and create a military fortress of the devils here. If Soren did not exist, this battle was destined to drag on until the end of the Avatar crisis. Then the gods who had recovered their power could slowly take back the lost land from the devils. This process may take a long time. The pain left by the whole war would be with them for a long time, perhaps hundreds of years would not be enough for the material plane to recover. But Soren had already expected all of this, and the plan that he had been preparing for a long time also exploded after the devils launched the attack. In the middle of March 1678 of the New Moon era, the devils of the bottomless abyss were restless. Under the summoning of a powerful devil lord, a vanguard of more than 1 million devils began to advance from the lower level of the bottomless abyss to the first layer of the abyss plane. The abyss bloody war was summoning. After being suppressed by the Devil army for nearly 1,000 years, a powerful Devil Lord relaunched a counterattack on the Abyss Plain. Chapter 1107. What was the most abundant thing in the Abyss? Cannon fodder. In the long history of the Abyss, almost any attack against the Devils could easily assemble hundreds of thousands of cannon fodder legions. Compared with the Bator Inferno, which only had 9 layers, the Abyss had hundreds of layers that could recruit troops, and it could easily explode dozens of times more troops. If it weren't for the chaotic nature of the Devils and the lack of an effective Devil commander, the Devil Legion would not have been able to easily suppress the Abyss. At least during the period of the 3 Abyss Giants, the two sides fought back and forth for thousands of years. It was not until the Abyss lacked an effective commander that it was completely suppressed by the Devil Legion. The situation in the material plane was very dangerous. Even if some places stopped the Devils, it was inevitable that a large amount of land would fall under the attack of the Devils. The southern troops had approached the Wind Spear Hills. If it weren't for the city of Mordor falling from the sky to the south coast, the heavily damaged southern area would have completely fallen. It used to be the most prosperous and populated place in the material plane, but now the cities had withered. Whiterun, Autumnfall, Amber City, and so on, the once prosperous cities were destroyed under the impact of the Avatar crisis. Only a few areas under the protection of the gods in the entire southern area survived, and some weak gods such as the god of travel, the halflings' god of death, the pygmies' god of espionage and rebellion, the dwarfs' god of defense and god of travel, and so on, fell under the attack of the Grand Duke. For a long time, the gods of the human god system were the ones who suffered the most. Now the gods of other races were also seriously injured, especially some of the weaker non-combat gods who died one after another. The Devils were undoubtedly much smarter than the Devils. After occupying a large area of land, they did not blindly slaughter and harvest souls, but quickly used evil spells to control some of the humans and then turn them into fallen ones. The followers of the Devils swelled at an amazing speed. They helped to enslave other races as servants of the Devils, and even opened a portal to send some human slaves to the Bator Inferno. However, just as the Devil Legion was triumphantly marching towards the Wind Spear Hills and Glory City, they never thought that a powerful Devil Overlord would suddenly emerge from the bottomless abyss that had been in chaos for thousands of years. Furthermore, he had gathered an incomparably huge Devil Legion together with other Devil Overlords. At this moment, they had already reached the first layer of the bottomless abyss, the 10,000 Abyss Plains. 10,000 Abyss Plains. This was a barren land that was devoid of life and covered in thick dust. It was roasting under the dark red sun that was like hell. There were 3 landforms in the dusty plains, a huge abyss on the surface, a huge steel fortress, and the river Styx. There were many steel fortresses on this level. However, due to the continuous losses in the war with the demons, most of the land here had been occupied by the demons. Even Farag, an important fortress in Molten Iron Lake, had been taken over by the demon army. In countless confrontations, the Devil Legion had once approached the broken region. Fortunately, Red Shroud had the support of Mechanut. Otherwise, it would have been difficult to stop the Devil Legion. At this moment, the Endless Devil Legion had arrived in the vicinity of the broken region. This was the gathering point of the demons and also the territory of Red Shroud. For a long time, it had always been the outpost of the Abyss Blood War. Red Shroud ruled Broken Region Town. This town was used as a gathering point for the Bloody War mercenaries, a transit station for travelers who were crazy enough to explore the bottomless abyss, and a trading place for the demons. This town was formed by a series of collapsed towers, surrounded by trenches, city walls, and spiked barricades and other war fortifications. There were several important areas underground, such as the entrance to a town in the Outland, Plague Horn. At the same time, there was also a food storage room, an armory, a torture room, and an underground tomb. They were connected to each other by narrow tunnels. Mechanut's Bloody War army was stationed nearby. Almost any powerful Devil Overlord had participated in the Bloody War. In the bottomless abyss, the Bloody War was the best tool for Devil Overlords to gain reputation. Since the birth of the bottomless abyss, any Devil Overlord who wanted to sit firmly on the throne of the Abyss Overlord or Devil Prince had to personally participate in the Abyss Blood War and control a powerful Bloody War army. In the past, the 3 overlords of the bottomless abyss were responsible for the Bloody War. They fought against the devils from 3 fronts at the same time. During that time, Demogorgon was the main force of the Bloody War. But now the main force of the Bloody War had changed. Mechanut was not a Devil Overlord with crazy ideals. What she cared about the most was her amazing beauty and exuberant body, so she was unwilling to put her favorite succubus into the Abyss Blood War's meat grinder battlefield. Mechanut did not have the crazy idea of ruling the multiverse, and she had always dealt with the Abyss Blood War. So to a certain extent, the situation of the devils being hung up and beaten was partly caused by her. As one of the overlords of the bottomless abyss, Mechanut cared more about her own enjoyment and building her own kingdom in the bottomless abyss. The devils were not surprised that Sauron would start the bloody war. Even all the devil overlords felt that this was inevitable. Because to become the devil prince of the bottomless abyss, in addition to constantly defeating other devil overlords, there was only one way to declare his greatness to the devils, and that was to defeat the devils on the bloody war battlefield. Many devil overlords breathed a sigh of relief at the bloody war launched by Sauron. In any case, it was much better for this rapidly rising and powerful Baelor Lord to fight to the death in the bloody war than to turn the spearhead to deal with them. So when Sauron decided to counterattack the 10,000 Abyss Plain, many powerful devil overlords responded. They sent a portion of their troops to support, hoping to use the bloody war to attract Sauron's exuberant desire to fight. This prevented Sauron from expanding in the bottomless abyss again. He had already seized Orcus's territory, killed the Ghoul King Doraisin and killed the Gnoll King Yeenagu. The Baelor leader's territory now exceeded that of Demogorgon. If he continued to expand, no devil overlord could stop him. This was something that all the devil overlords did not want to see. But once the bloody war began, Sauron would inevitably be involved in the endless war, which would weaken Sauron's strength. At the same time, he would not have too much energy to pay attention to other aspects. This time the bloody war started. Just the devil overlords who responded to Sauron were the succubus queen Mechanut, the faceless king Jupiter, the vengeful lord Edibi, the shadow witch queen Rexa, the tauren king Buffet, the mystery lord, the creeping king, the six-armed snake queen Shaktari, the dark monarch's successor Rhine. The devils had been hung up and beaten for nearly 1,000 years. When they learned that the Devil Legion had invaded the material plane, the devil overlords who had been repelled in the last attack were dissatisfied. The cunning devils waited for them to consume the strength of the material plane before coming out to pick the fruits of their labor. So when a powerful devil overlord decided to restart the bloody war, they immediately sent a portion of their forces to prepare to explode the devil's chrysanthemum from behind to vent the hatred that had accumulated for nearly 1,000 years. However, the real main force came from Sauron and Mechanut. The succubus queen seemed to realize that she needed a victory to restore her prestige. Moreover, this operation had the support of the new Death Lord. Chapter 1108. The demon lords were always fighting among themselves. But there was one thing that could unite them temporarily, and that was the Abyss Blood War. There was a very strange phenomenon during the time of the Abyss Three Giants. That was, the Dark King and Demogorgon were fighting to the death in the bottom of the abyss, while the Blood War Legion of both sides were fighting with the Devil Legion near the dissolved Iron Lake. At that time, the dissolved Iron Lake had not been lost. As one of the most important strongholds of the demons, it was an important force that could fight against the devils. The productivity of the abyss was extremely low. To some extent, it was not even qualified to carry the shoes of the devils. When there was the dissolved Iron Lake, it could barely compete with the devils. But after losing the dissolved Iron Lake, the Abyss Demon's metal production could not be self-sufficient. The main demand of the Abyss was now met by the demons' smuggling. However, after Sauron divided the Abyss, this situation began to ease. Especially after the connection between Motor City and the Abyss was opened, Motor City could absorb and digest the minerals occupied by Sauron, and then provide weapons and armor to the Devil Legion in turn. At this time, the mighty demon army had already approached the molten Iron Lake. The first few strongholds of the devils were easily flattened by the Devil Legion. Sauron's Devil Legion did not even have a chance to fight. But the dissolved Iron Lake was not an ordinary stronghold. There was a Devil Legion stationed here and there was a huge steel fortress. The core of the dissolved Iron Lake was Ferreg. A huge steel fortress was located near the dissolved Iron Lake. It was originally built by the devils, and then it was rebuilt by the devils. The dissolved Iron Lake was like a natural white-hot furnace filled with molten iron. It had always been an important stronghold for the devils and devils to fight for. After the death of the First Lord, Ferreg entertained countless devil legions who were interested in collecting iron to build other steel fortresses. Because the devils valued iron very much, the Devil Strike Force often attacked the dissolved Iron Lake. This place was once used as the command center of the Devil Legion that protected the dissolved Iron Lake. But at the end of the Abyss 3 giants, the Devil Legion occupied this place and seized control of the dissolved Iron Lake. From then on, the devils who lost their strategic point became more and more unfavorable. Sauron's goal was to take the dissolved Iron Lake. As long as he took this natural furnace, no enemy in the first layer of the Abyss could stop him, and the other Devil Legions could quickly gain armed forces. At this moment, an army of over 1 million demons was already closing in. As the supreme commander of the demon army, Sauron commanded all the troops, and the other demon lords sent their legions as cannon fodder. They would be satisfied if 1/5 of them could return alive. Therefore these demon lords did not care about winning or losing, nor did they mind handing over command to Sauron. Ever since the bloody war in the Chaos Abyss broke out, the demons would have to pay a huge price in almost every battle. Half of the casualties would be considered small, and the demons that survived would be able to grow rapidly. Although the number of demons was huge, the main force was still small. However, this bloody battle was obviously different from the past. The number of high-level demons had greatly increased, and they were mainly Sauron's followers. They also believed that Sauron needed a bloody counterattack to complete the transformation from Demon Overlord to Demon Prince. Only by defeating the devils in a bloody battle could Sauron's reputation as being more powerful than other demon lords. The other demon lords were no match for the Devil Legion. However, their master not only defeated the devils, but also recovered the first layer of the Abyss, the 10,000 Abyss Plane. Who had the right to oppose him? The steel fortress in front of them was huge. Although many of the devil's bloody battle legions had been dispatched to the material plane, there were still 3 legions stationed here, with about 50,000 devil troops. More than 1 million against 50,000 troops. It seemed to be a huge advantage, but when the real battle began, reality gave the demons a cruel slap in the face. The first wave of nearly 100,000 demon cannon fodder pushed forward, but under the demons' highly disciplined and concentrated firepower, they did not even touch the steel fortress. The demons laughed as they harvested tens of thousands of demon heads, and then watched as the piles of low-level demons collapsed. The devils were of a higher level, and the mobilization of troops was strictly prohibited. They were not at the same level as the demons. Many of the demons who followed were a little disappointed when they saw the situation. Berserker demon formation, get ready to move out. Sauron looked down on all of this from above. He knew that there was no point in sending the low-level demons to their deaths now. This was a battle of siege, not a field battle. The low-level demons were of little use. Following Sauron's orders, a few berserker demons equipped with heavy weapons and armor appeared. These demons made the Devil Legion feel uneasy, because they had never seen such a well-armed demon army. At the same time, a formation of 6-armed Merilith appeared at the back. Not only were they well-armed, they were also fully armored. In the past, only the core guards of the demon overlords could have such an army, but now they saw an exaggerated number. The situation of the battle began to change. The clamoring bone devils were crushed, and the pit fiends flying in the sky were shot down by the Balers. Under the cover of the berserker demons, the 6-armed Merilith army successfully approached the steel fortress, and then attacked a stronghold. The Balrog army move out. Sauron's face immediately lit up and he said decisively, "It's time for the Yugoloths to enter the battlefield." Some demon mercenaries from other planes joined the battle. Most of them were demons from the scorching inferno. Sauron had the aura of the Lord of Death behind him. This time the demons were on the demons' side. The battle entered a state of slaughter. Even after breaking through a corner, the devils still stubbornly resisted the attacks, and even tried to counterattack a few times. In just 3 rounds of fighting, tens of thousands of mid-rank demons had died. More than 10 6-armed Merilith had died, and 2 Balers had died. The casualties were even greater than when they attacked the other demon lords. However, the huge casualties also brought about great results. The Devil Legion had lost about 20% of their forces. 20% didn't seem like much, but the Devil Legion only had about 50,000 in total. There were still millions of demons left, and this filled many of them with confidence. The gigantic bull devils took the initiative to join the battle, and an army of 50 beholders moved out as well. This was the reinforcements of the great matriarch of the beholders. Due to the small number of beholders, the entire army was only about 300. Beholders were perhaps the most deadly of all the powerful races, and they were also the most deformed in appearance. They had terrifying lethality, and even the devils found it difficult to deal with them. A group of beholders could form a dense barrage of light attacks. When they stood on the side with the advantage, they were almost like mobile cannons. The molten iron lake fortress was gradually collapsing. Demons were creatures that liked to beat up those who were down. After being suppressed by the devils for so long, seeing that they had gained the upper hand, many other demon armies didn't even listen to Sauron's orders, and took the initiative to join the battle and reap the lives of the devils. In the Abyss Blood War, there were always demons seeking to advance who took the initiative to join. Chapter 1109. As the last devil army was annihilated by the demons, the molten iron lake officially changed owners. Countless demons cheered. After thousands of years of oppression, they finally defeated the devils and took down the most important molten iron lake in the 10,000 Abyss Plain. As long as they kept this place, they could continuously obtain metal, which was a great advantage in the blood war against the devils. Master, we won. The molten iron lake has been conquered by us. It's time to drive the devils back home. All the high-level demons were very excited, especially those who had successfully harvested the heads of the devils. Killing enemies in the blood war could allow them to improve faster. Just by eliminating the 50,000 devils, tens of thousands of low-level demons had already advanced. This efficiency was like a battle with 20% EXP suddenly increased to 100% EXP. Every demon who had experienced the blood war would feel it very clearly. If not for the high casualties and danger of the blood war, this kind of war would be addictive to the demons. But even so, there were still many demons who joined the blood war. Sauron was not too happy about the glorious results of the war for the demons, killing 50,000 devils at the cost of 200,000. Because the strength of the devils was indeed too powerful. It was not that the individual devils had higher combat power, but their discipline when organized into an army had amazing combat power. More than 1,000,000 demons against 50,000 devils. Although this was a difficult battle, more than 200,000 of them had died. This result was not a great victory in other places, but it was a glorious battle for the demons. Even the other demon lords who heard the news began to request to send out troops to participate in the blood war because the blood war was the fastest way to advance. If there were a few more victories like this, they would have a large number of high-level demons under their command. The reality was so funny. They had achieved such results with 20 times the number of troops, and they had already sent out part of their main force. If not for the fact that a large number of demons had advanced after this battle, Sauron doubted that it would be possible to defeat the Baator Inferno. But in any case, everything was off to a good start. As long as they won, the demon army would be endless. Countless new demons and demons who were seeking to advance would join the battlefield. And when the devils sent a large number of troops to attack the material plane, it was easy for Sauron to push them to the Baator Inferno. But all of this had to be done quickly. They had to achieve a glorious victory before the devils could react. The molten iron lake had already been lost. This was also a huge loss for the devils, and he believed that the news would soon reach the 8 infernal generals. What Sauron wanted to do was to nurture a batch of flame balers while recovering the rift plains. Only a large number of flame balers would be able to resist the devil's blood war elites. Meanwhile, in many places in the material plains such as Arendelle, the Northern Spire, the Windspear Hills, and the Barren Border, the resistance army of the various races and the church forces of the gods could clearly sense a little change. In other words, the Devil Legion's attacks had been reduced by 30%. It was as if the enemy's attack had finally been blocked. This made many people feel extremely excited, and they also saw a glimmer of hope for victory. However, only those who truly saw through the fog knew that this wasn't the work of humans, but a certain existence in the dark was resisting all of this. In the deepest part of Glory City, an incomparably powerful god was also watching the bottomless abyss. Baler leader Sauron? Is it his incarnation? Interesting. He actually used this method to stop the devil's footsteps. The blood war broke out again, putting great pressure on the devils. At this moment, the head of the 8 infernal generals, Baer, who occupied a large area of land in the south and was approaching the wizard city, was faced with a difficult choice. That was to ignore the rift plains and attack the material plane with full force, or to dispatch a part of the Devil Legion to defend the rift plains. The Avatar crisis was about to end. If the gods fought for the shackles and restored their strength, then the Devil Legion would be finished. There were at least 5 great divine powers in the material plane who were hostile to them. Because they were trapped in the body of a saint, they didn't dare to fight head-on for fear of death. However, if they restored their divine powers, they would definitely not be able to resist a big wave. If the devils were in the Baator Inferno, it would be fine. In any case, there was Lord Asmodeus. The gods couldn't do anything in the Baator Inferno. However, if it was the material plane, Asmodeus wouldn't dare to act rashly. The reason was simple. He was also afraid of death. The gods would fall in the Avatar crisis, and so would the Lord of Hell. This was fair. In essence, although Asmodeus did not weaken as much as the gods because of the Avatar crisis, he could also be killed. Bottomless abyss, dissolved iron lake. It was not until this moment that Sauron felt the terrible advantage of the devils in numbers. He also understood why the Devil Legion could fight equally with the devils. They only needed a strong leader, that was all. In just one day, Sauron's troops didn't decrease because of more than 200,000 casualties. On the contrary, they quickly expanded to the size of 1.5 million. It was terrifying. Countless devils came to the Rift Plains by various means. They sneaked in from the river Styx and arrived from the portal. As long as they were ambitious devils, it seemed that they wanted to give it a try. There were more than 600 known layers in the abyss. Even if only 1,000 devils came from each layer, it would be a huge army of more than 600,000. Now, in the broken region of the Rift Plains, more than 300,000 devils had gathered again. They came from Asgrat, Zeta Tower, Frozen Wilderness, Magic Net Prison, that's right. The Queen of Spiders territory, Smaggard, Saltwater Swamp, Slime Prison, Poison Valley, Well of Darkness, and so on. Just by looking at the names of these layers, one could know how terrible the war potential of the abyss was. The premise of this potential outbreak was that there must be a devil lord who was strong enough to lead the blood war, and that was the Devil Prince of the Abyss. Once Demogorgon led all of this, and now Sauron had gained the recognition of most of the devils. At least after recovering the dissolved Iron Lake, he had taken the lead in this part of the blood war. There were already more than 100,000 devils who came to him. The terrible human wave tactic was taking shape. After seeing the hope of defeating the devils, the devil army under Sauron's command expanded at a very terrifying speed. It had to be said. Compared to the Baator Inferno with only 9 layers, the Abyss with at least 600 layers had an extremely terrifying advantage in terms of population. In that case, since they had such a huge advantage in terms of population, let the devils face the tide of demons. If a demon were to kill a pit fiend, there was a chance that it would quickly evolve into a Baelor, which was the basic form of a Baelor. Baelors were a branch of the Baelors, a fusion between a Baelor and a Baelor. The core force of the bottomless abyss was the Baelor. They were the backbone of the higher demons, and they could evolve into the Baelor form above level 25. This victory brought a large number of middle-ranked demons, and it also made the other demons realize that the power of the devils had been weakened. This was an excellent opportunity. In the past battles, it wasn't as if the devils had never encountered such a large army. The demon army was often in the hundreds of thousands, but the devils' reinforcements were also very fast. Basically, as soon as the hundreds of thousands of demons arrived on the battlefield, the devils would have tens of thousands of reinforcements behind them. The battle was maintained at a ratio of 10 to 1. The devil army had good mobility. They used airdrops and teleportation circles to maintain a balance, ensuring that the front of the battlefield would not be overwhelmed by the number of demons. But now the devils seemed to have lost this ability. Their reinforcements from the first layer of the Baator Inferno had disappeared, and only the devils stationed there could resist. The reason was simple. The troops stationed in the first layer of the Baator Inferno had been transferred to the material plane. Even if they wanted to return, it would not be possible in a short time. In the short span of a day, the 5 steel fortresses occupied by the devils had been uprooted. One of them was the work of the succubus queen, another was the sudden rise of a lesser demon lord, and the last 3 were contributed by Sauron. In this bloody battle, a powerful demon lord had risen. No one knew his name, but he should have been a legendary professional when he was alive. He quickly promoted from the Dretch form to a Hezru, and then became a high-level Baelor. Now he had an army of more than 200,000 demons. His deeds were spread quickly by Sauron's intentional promotion, causing countless demons to be restless. In just a few days of fighting, a demon had risen at a speed that other demons would not be able to achieve in thousands of years. He had also obtained the recognition of the demon prince, Sauron, and the steel fortress he had conquered in the 10,000 abyss plains had become his fief. He had suddenly become a famous secondary demon lord. In contrast, many demons who struggled for thousands of years could not compare to him in a few days. This was the charm of a bloody battle. The new demon lord called himself Galan. He was an unusually tall and strong Baelor, up to 6 meters tall. He used a 2-handed heavy sword and retained many combat skills from his previous life. He served the powerful Lord Sauron and became a follower of the Demon Prince. He was a smart guy. After his rapid rise, he realized that his foundation was unstable, so he chose a powerful demon lord as his backer. He was now Sauron's vanguard. At present, the number of the demon army had swelled to about 3 million. Among them, 500,000 vanguard troops led by Gallen had approached the border of the 10,000 Abyss Plain. The middle army was 1.5 million demons, and there were hundreds of thousands of demons gathering at the rear. If the Devil's reinforcements did not arrive, at most, by tomorrow afternoon, the Devil's achievements of nearly 1,000 years would be destroyed. The demons would capture all their steel fortresses and push the battle line to the Grey Wilderness, Shuraba, and Bator Inferno. Continuous victories made the demons' heads swell. There was no need to doubt how crazy these chaotic and evil guys were. After being suppressed for thousands of years, many high-grade demons and even demon lords became dizzy with continuous victories. They began to clamor to fight all the way to the Bator Inferno and let the devils have a taste of their power. That's right. Fight all the way to the Bator Inferno. Although this idea was crazy, it was the same as Sauron's. If they did not attack the Bator Inferno, it was impossible to force the Devil army to retreat. Chapter 11:11. The Bottomless Abyss, the first layer of the Abyss Plains. As the demon army advanced, the battle line approached the edge of the chaotic void. This layer had the following characteristics: normal gravity. The top layer of the Abyss Plains, and many other layers had normal gravity characteristics, but some other layers of the Abyss may have different gravity characteristics. Normal time. The flow of time in the Abyss is the same as in the material world. However, it was rumored that there was a layer of time that passed in reverse due to relative aging. Although the reverse flow was strange, a visitor may rejuvenate or even turn into nothingness. Infinite space. The layers of the Abyss are always infinite, although its known kingdoms are limited. Divine form. The entity must be at least as powerful as a low-level god to change the Abyss. Weaker creatures will find that the Abyss is no different from the material world. Changeable form characteristic. This is because the plane can be changed by magic and physical effects. Mixed element and energy characteristic. This characteristic is different from layer to layer. From the perspective of the Abyss as a whole, there was no element or energy that could continuously dominate the Abyss, although there would be a dominant element or energy in certain layers, or a mixture of two or more elements. Weak chaotic tendency and weak evil tendency. Lawful characters will suffer a -2 penalty on all charity-based checks in the Abyss, and good characters will suffer the same penalty. Lawful and good characters will suffer a -4 penalty on all charity-based checks. The Abyss itself was endless. However, the size of the known layers was limited. Some layers could not be reached and could only be set foot in through special means. In the Abyss, all the layers were flat spaces, big and small, with slight differences in gravity. The laws of these layers could change and the size would change with time. The Abyss Plains was originally a little smaller than it was now. When the demons occupied this land, they fused with a half-plane from the astral world, and extended a platform connected to the Azura field. Close to the chaotic void, even low-level gods may not be able to resist the power of the space-time turbulence. Near this land, the outer gravity had disappeared. Within the range of the naked eye, there were many boulders floating in the void. The small ones were only a few centimeters, and the big ones could be dozens of kilometers. The space-time turbulence would intermittently erupt nearby, and some substances would be destroyed and some strange crystals would be born. These were the destructive substances. The demon's last stronghold was close to the chaotic void, on a piece of land that was about 100 square kilometers in size at the edge of the 10,000 Abyss Plain. This was the bridgehead used by the demons to attack the 10,000 Abyss Plains. It was also the transfer point to the Bator Inferno. Due to the changes in the power of laws, this place had been transformed by the devils. A fortress that occupied a large area and had walls that were more than 10 meters tall was right in front of them. Originally, there were more than 100,000 devil troops stationed here, but now this number had been reduced by half because most of the main forces were in the material plane. At this moment, the seemingly endless abyssal army had arrived. More than 3 million demons spread out like a sea of heads. The attack had already started the previous night, and countless demon cannon fodder had been sent to the battlefield. They didn't aim to deplete the enemy's numbers, but rather to reduce the devil's physical strength and spells. This was a desperate battle. There was almost no strategy to speak of, and the demons could not come up with a feasible strategy. Since last night, there had been wave after wave of attacks, and each time there were more than 100,000 demons joining the battle. The attack lasted for about an hour, and the second batch of demons would immediately take over. Now it was the 17th wave of attacks. In this terrible battlefield of flesh and blood, hundreds of thousands of demons had died, but the number of devils had also begun to decrease gradually because they had to face too many enemies. The demons' attack was endless. Because at this level, there was a continuous stream of reinforcements arriving, and with the death of the devils, some demons were also rapidly advancing. The devils' defensive line was like a solid rock. But no matter how solid the rock was, there was a limit to the attacks it could withstand. Now that there were cracks on this rock, and after the demons had paid hundreds of thousands of casualties, the defensive line of the fortress had become precarious. Let's start the general attack. Sauron had been watching this ruthless war of attrition, and he sent hundreds of thousands of demons as cannon fodder without blinking an eye. When the devil's defensive line finally cracked, the real main forces began to move. It was an army of about 1,000 six-armed snake demons. 300 beholder demons were slowly approaching. More than 500 balers had already risen into the air and began to attack the enemy's defensive line from the side. More than 100 balers were ready to attack. More than 20 balers were behind Sauron, and they could teleport to support the battlefield at any time. Glabrizu, soul-judging demons, assassin demons, and so on. Thousands of greater demons were waiting for an opportunity. Under Sauron's leadership, they more or less knew to obey orders, or at least knew that they should only attack after receiving orders. The final battle had begun. Tens of thousands of middle-grade and high-grade demons were thrown into the battle. Some of them were like mountains of flesh on the ground, while others spread their wings and soared into the sky, leaving a shadow behind. These terrifying demons madly charged at the enemy, tearing holes in the demon's defense line. Let Volcano go. With a high-pitched dragon roar, a strong abyssal demon dragon that had entered its old age appeared with 3 adult abyssal demon dragons. They submitted to Sauron's power and were forcibly summoned to the bloody battlefield. A terrifying dragon's breath covered the sky above the steel fortress. As a powerful dragon species, even the devils and demons could not ignore the power of the giant dragon. The abyssal demon dragon left a terrible scar in the devil's defensive line, and instantly became the last card to break the defensive line. Charge. Once the defensive line that the devils were proud of was broken, the battle was basically over. Because in this situation, every devil had to face more than 10 times the number of demons. Even if they were powerful, they could not defeat several enemies of the same level at the same time. Thousands of demons rushed into the fortress. Behind them, hundreds of thousands of demons were madly swarming in. They were like locusts attacking the devil's remaining defensive line. Although there were still hundreds of demons dying every second, no one cared at this time because they were about to win. The demons' madness was unreasonable. They would even kill their own people when they went crazy. But this madness also represented a terrible desire to fight. The demons did not care about casualties at all. As long as they saw the hope of victory, they were all battle maniacs. The battle was about to end. The devil's last fortress in the Rift Plain was about to be sacrificed, and they would be completely driven out of the abyss. But at this moment, Sauron did not have the slightest joy. He just quietly watched all of this. Then, a divine radiance appeared on his body. He disappeared into the demon army, and the other secondary demon lords took over the command. Sauron still had the most important thing to do. That was to merge his original body with the demon incarnation. The demon incarnation could not fight against the Lord of Hell, Asmodeus. If he wanted to counterattack the Baator Inferno, his original body must face the pressure of the Lord of Hell. It was time to merge the two into one. The divinity and godhood of the demon incarnation would merge with the original body. He would no longer be an independent individual, but become one of Sauron's incarnations. The Avatar crisis was about to end. This turmoil had reduced the population of the material plane by nearly 80%, and now it was time to end this disaster. Chapter 11-12. Avernus. The first level of the Baator Inferno was a wasteland filled with scorched rocks. The mountains and sloping hills broke the monotonous landscape, and countless armored devil legions stood guard here forever, always gathering for interplanar assaults. The air was filled with blood-red light, and fireballs would sometimes dance in the air and fall from the sky, creating terrifying explosions. Rivers of blood flowed through Avernus, finally converging into the main river of the Styx. No one knew where the blood came from, though the devils claimed it could be the blood of all the victims of Avernus. The core of this level was the Bronze Citadel, a crude, sturdy and rigid city that covered about 30 square miles. It was known for its 12 concentric rings of walls, and each ring held a war machine. This Devil's City was filled with devils, both lesser devils and spirit shells, as well as tens of thousands of lesser devils that were ready for the blood wars. In the past, Avernus was the front line to deal with large-scale demon attacks. Fortifications were constantly added to the Bronze Citadel. The spirit shells, lesser devils, and lesser devils that did the hard work constantly expanded the city. Near the Bronze Citadel was the Skull Pillar, a giant object made of skulls that symbolized the evil spoils of war. Most of these spoils were twisted, demon skulls that varied in size from extremely small to as large as a house. The terrifying Skull Pillar was more than a mile tall, and contained countless powerful demon skulls. These were all spoils of war. The lord of the first level of the Bator Inferno was Bayer. He was a legendary being who rose from the weakest of devils. At the heart of the Bronze Citadel stood Bayer, a powerful pit fiend that controlled Avernus. Other than being the first lord of the Bator Inferno, Bayer was also a general in the Blood Wars, though he wasn't one of the Dark Eight. Bayer had betrayed the former First Lord, Zariel, for his current position. According to his subordinates, Bayer was still imprisoning Zariel somewhere in the depths of the Bronze Citadel so that he could absorb her hellish power and slowly turn her into another soul shell to increase his own abilities. Although Barty had risen quickly, he had very little relationship with the other demon lords. It seemed that apart from Asmodeus, the other archdevils weren't very friendly to Barty. The first lord of the first level of the Bator Inferno was Tiamat, the five-headed dragon queen, the evil dragon god. But later on, Tiamat seized a half-plane and attached it to the gap between the lower planes. So from then on, she had already left the Bator Inferno camp. Tiamat's ruler was Zariel, now the rising Barty Empire. Part of the dragon god's divine kingdom was connected to the Bator Inferno. There was an entrance to her divine kingdom here, but this dragon god had kept a low profile for the past thousands of years. Low-profile gods generally lived for a long time. Of course, it was also possible that she had unknowingly fallen asleep. The dragon gods were the rarest. Even if they were active, they would only stroll around the astral plane. They could sleep for hundreds of years at a time. Basically, not many gods went back to challenge the dragon gods. This was because there wasn't much of a conflict of interest. Moreover, even a weak dragon god could cross 2 levels to fight against other gods with intermediate divine powers. These dragon gods were simply too powerful in terms of basic abilities. Avernus wasn't peaceful today. Because when the first level of the Abyss was recovered, the crazy demons were already preparing to counterattack the Bator Inferno. If it was in the past, this wouldn't be an easy task. Because there was the river Styx between the 2 planes, teleportation took time, which was enough time for the demons to react. But now, everything was different because Soren was the Lord of the Dead. He was the ruler of the underworld and the god who managed the underworld in the multiverse. As long as he agreed, the demons could all pass through the river Styx in half a day. This time, the demons finally experienced the feeling of having someone behind them. Not only did the ferryman of the river Styx not charge them an exorbitant fee, but he also quickly organized the Yugoloth demons to send hundreds of thousands of demons across the river Styx. The first level of the Bator Inferno, Avernus, instantly suffered a crazy counterattack from the demons. No one in the multiverse would doubt the bloodthirstiness and belligerence of the demons. When they felt that there was a great god behind them, the demons automatically activated the morale boost attribute and took over 3 defensive fortresses at the edge of the river Styx. Then they quickly built fortifications and built a stable platform to cross the plains. Avernus was a prosperous land. There were countless factories of the demons on this level, producing large amounts of steel and weapons. At the same time, there was a huge army stationed here. At this moment, at the edge of the river Styx, the demon goblin warlock was excitedly commanding the other demons and roaring, "Idiots! Be careful. Hurry up and move this over. Slow down. If you break it, I'll skin you alive. Move them all away. Send them all to the molten iron lake. Hurry up. Hurry up." The productivity of the demons was completely incomparable to that of the demons. Just by taking over the 3 defensive fortresses of Avernus, they had taken over 5 warehouses filled with thousands of equipment. At the same time, there were 2 factories built nearby. After the demons took them down, they immediately moved them back under the command of the goblin warlock. This was the front line. Although the counterattack had reached the Bator Inferno, no one knew what the outcome of the battle would be. The demons just wanted to take revenge. Therefore these factories had to be moved back. The devil's cunning allowed them to hoard a large amount of wealth. Their combat resources were also one of the best in the multiverse. After the demons obtained these materials, they quickly armed more than 100,000 people and then pushed their army all the way to the vicinity of the Bronze Fortress. Here, the demons suffered their first heavy blow from the demons. After paying more than 100,000 casualties, not only did they not take over the Bronze Fortress, but they were also pushed back dozens of miles and lost a group of middle-grade and high-grade demons. At this time, the demons realized that the demons were still such a powerful enemy. The main force had not arrived yet, so the demons' vanguard could only defend and wait for reinforcements to arrive. At the same time, at the location where the bottomless abyss connected to the underworld, the figure of the Baylor Lord Sauron also appeared. He slowly entered the entrance of the underworld and flew towards the city of death. There, the main body, Sauron, was waiting for his arrival. After being separated for so long, the demon incarnation and the main body had finally merged into one. Chapter 11:13. The Underworld. After Sauron took over the highest authority of the underworld, the oracles from the Shadow Kingdom quickly re-established order. Everything had a cause and effect. Mordor itself was a city full of order and law, so most of the people were inclined to the order camp, and most of Sauron's believers strictly followed the law and rules, and this situation remained even after they died. This indirectly increased the potential of the petitioners in the kingdom of God. Why did so many of Sauron's believers turn into combat-type heroic spirits? The reason was simple. Many of them were soldiers of Mordor when they were alive. After being transformed into the servants of death, these petitioners did not need much training to form an army. Now all the entrances to the underworld were guarded by the servants of death. Not to mention the soul stealers from the lower planes, even the Styx memory stealers from the Baator Inferno had been expelled. And after the army of the servants of death was formed, the Slaughter Angel also subdued a group of Styx memory stealers from the underworld to the Baator Inferno. The Styx memory stealers were the stealers of memories and the caretakers of thoughts. Most of them built their nests on the banks of the Styx. They were also the guardians of the river that flowed in the first layer of the Baator Inferno, Avernus Styx. From the waist up, the Styx memory stealers still looked like a high-level demon. They had strong bodies and thick arms. Their faces, big mouths full of sharp teeth, and two thick horns protruding from both sides of the forehead were equally eye-catching. Their palms had hook-shaped claws, and they had a pair of huge bat-like wings on their backs. From the waist down, these demons looked more like some huge slugs. Their lower bodies dragged them along the ground, leaving a trail of sticky, slippery mucus wherever they went. These demons were originally a branch of the demons, and they were assimilated because they lived near the Styx for too long. They could come into contact with the Nether River slightly, and at the same time they had a challenge rating of 18. These monsters would have no problem taking on a Baylor alone. Sauron's servants had subdued the Acheron River Remembrancers. Currently, there were more than 500 Acheron River Remembrancers under his command. These demons were now in the Baator Inferno, waiting for the Lord of Death's command. Baylor leader Sauron arrived at the City of Death. A fog that was impenetrable to the naked eye shrouded the vicinity. In front of him, a figure that looked very thin and small appeared. He exuded a very powerful power, especially after leaving the material plane. The brilliance of divinity isolated the space. The Avatar crisis was weakening. Sauron's divine power was getting stronger day by day. His great divinity allowed him to avoid part of the energy storm of the Avatar crisis, and now he was gradually recovering his true strength. It was a wonderful feeling to use oneself to look at another self. However, Sauron did not have too much time to waste. He came to his avatar. Using the consciousness of a god to control two bodies at the same time was only a temporary solution. In the end, the original body and the avatar still had to be merged together. Change form, divine power. Change reality, divine power. Divine power fusion. With the emergence of the golden light, the figure of the Baylor Lord Sauron gradually became hazy. Countless divine brilliance emerged from his body, and then the huge body turned from real to illusory, turning into thousands of streams of light that rushed into Sauron's body. Divine power and divine power were merging into the body. Demons were creatures that could easily gain divinity. When killing the King of Ghouls, Dorison, and the King of Gnolls, Yeenagu, the demon avatar had already absorbed enough divinity. The whole process lasted for about 10 minutes. When the last divine power of the demon avatar merged into the body, a secret kingdom also emerged behind Sauron. Numerous majestic divine palaces stood erect. Countless petitioners surrounded the temple and prayed. Angels from other realms flew in the sky. Apostles of the Holy Spirit stood on the altar and sang. Thousands of petitioners sang the greatness of their master. This power made the underworld change a little. A faint fog appeared in the underworld, and a trace of shadow power was integrated into the characteristics of the plane. Who? Soren slowly opened his eyes. In an instant, it was as if a black thunderbolt had struck, and the void behind him trembled. Name: Soren, Saint Form, Greater Divine Power, Race, Half-Elf, Lord of the Dead, Attributes, Strength 35, Dexterity 49, Constitution 40, Intelligence 42, Wisdom 30, Charm 35 Alignment, Lawful Evil Profession. LV20 Rogue 0115500000, LV10 Shadow Dancer, Max, LV10 Wizard, 0134250000, LV20 Arcanist 0162500000, Grade 9 HP, 12551255, Epic Strengthen EXP, 8305075, Slaughter EXP, 35545, Profession EXP. Unassigned Skill Points, none Attribute Points, none Legend Level, 450 Divinity, 1160. Greater Divinity, your divinity is comparable to the most ancient gods. Divinity, 800, Greater Divinity, upgrading the Greater Divinity requires 900 points. Divine Power, 7513160000, you must explore the path of the Greater Divine Power on your own. Clergy, Death, Dead, Murder, Shadow, Theft, Half-Elf, Rogue, Tracking Domain. Order, Protection, Slumber, Mage, Magic, Tyranny, Strife, Lies, Conspiracy, Deception, Illusion, Disease, Poison, Trickery, Slaughter, Death, Fear, Evil, Domination, Piracy, Shadow, Plant Spiritual Energy. Evil Spiritual Energy, Fear Spiritual Energy Status. Normal Basic Skills, Sneak 695, Literacy 685, Steal 685, Pick Lock 575, Snare 555, Focus 625, Negotiate 655, Appraise 555, Deceive 535, Intimidate 695, Taunt 495, Perform 485, Listen 585, Dodge 695, Parry 585, Block 575, Heal 575, Search 575, Detect 695, Copy Scroll 525, Spell Identify 615, Survival 555, Use Magic Equipment 525, Cooking 325, Alchemy 655, Forge Magic Weapon 575 Saint Form, Transcendence, Spell Immunity 1-6, Epic Divine Power, Instant Cast 1-8. Divinity Immunity, Elemental Damage, Elemental Absorption, Fire, Acid, Cold, Instant Death, Disease, Disintegrate, Electricity, Energy Drain, Mind Influence, Paralysis, Poison, Sleep, Intimidation, Transfiguration, Imprisonment, Exile. Divinity Abilities, Space Change, Size Change, Death's Hand, Reality Change, Form Change, Divine Shield, Area Divine Shield, Arcane Control, Summon Creature, Demon, Summon Creature, Servant of Death, Additional Domain, Destruction, Divine Shockwave, Area Divine Shockwave, Language Proficiency, Character Proficiency, Interplane Communication, Astral Teleportation, Plane Teleportation. Avatar, Destructive Strike, Create Magic Item, Create High Magic Item, Divine Power Acceleration, Divine Power Creation, Divine Power Spell Specialization, Divine Power Spell Resistance, Divine Power Spell Penetration, Automatic Arcane Casting, Absolute Strike. Legendary Abilities, Legendary Spell Maximization, Epic Mana, Legendary Instant Cast, Legendary Mana Construct, Legendary Tenacity, Legendary Spell Penetration, Legendary Reflex, Sight Weakness, Perfect Dual Wielding, Omnipotent Hands, Legendary Evasion, Legendary Battle Techniques, Epic Dexterity, Epic Intelligence, Epic Constitution, Epic Strength, Epic Perception, Epic Charm. Special Abilities, Blessing of the Goddess of Magic, God Slayer, Blessing of the Misfortune Goddess, Blessing of the Ocean Goddess, Heart of Slaughter, Slayer, Death Walker, Ascetic, Erudite, Blasphemy. Personal Abilities, Nimble Left Hand, Eidetic Memory, Perseverance, Encyclopedic Knowledge, Skilled Spellcasting, Reflex Evasion, Intuitive Evasion, Roll Evasion, Agile Movement, Evasive Sight, Dark Vision, Combat Spellcasting, Mobile Spellcasting, Spell Control, Empower spell maximization, magic equipment crafting, spell penetration, high magic resistance, high cold resistance, high fire resistance, high poison resistance, high electric resistance, sturdy, high regeneration, telepathy 1000. Feat. Profession abilities: arcane memory, arcane counterspell, arcane runes, shadow dominator, nimble mind, military weapon, proficiency, curved sword, legendary. Combat skills: summon shadow, any, shadow jump, 1500 meters. Any, shadow strike, any, shadow jump, any, vampiric touch, any, sword form, heavy slash, sword form, horizontal slash, sword form, decapitation, sword form, waist slash, sword form, spinning strike, spinning slash. The void was trembling. As Soren fused with the power of the demon incarnation, his own attributes seemed to have undergone some unknown changes. At the same time, in the third layer of the abyss, the Forgotten Land, the god's kingdom that had been grafted to the abyss began to move upward slowly. This time, the movement was not very big because the target of the god's kingdom was very close, which was the underworld. Soren's kingdom of God was approaching the underworld. At the same time, after Soren merged with the power of the demon incarnation, the secondary demon lords who followed and served the Baelor Flame Lord, Sauron, had a slight change. There was a slight deviation in their alignment, and at the same time, they received some blessings from the Lord of the Dead. Especially those demon lords who had obtained the One Ring, they had automatically obtained some necromancy spells. The whole process lasted for a day. Soren's kingdom of God was getting closer and closer to the underworld, and finally stabilized between the abyss and the underworld. At the same time, a part of the abyss and the underworld was grafted. Bator Inferno. The mighty demon army entered the first layer of hell. Millions of demons launched a fierce counterattack against the devils. The battlefront was once again pushed into the Bronze Fortress. No one knew when it started, but there was a rumor that the powerful Baelor Lord, Sauron, was actually the incarnation of the Lord of Death. He had long disliked the devils and was preparing to retaliate against them for their actions of looting the underworld. In short, in this bloody battle they had the support of a powerful god, and it was the most powerful Lord of Death in the underworld. The demons were in high spirits. With the support of the Lord of Death, they were less afraid of the Lord of Hell. Those demon lords who wanted to curry favor with Soren also acted upon hearing the news. Soren ruled the River Styx. The River Styx was also the lifeline of the demons. They had to do something to reduce Soren's hostility. Chapter 11:14. The Material Plane. The attack of the devils was fierce, but in just a few days, it seemed that some forces had stopped them. Suddenly, the number of devils began to decrease significantly. The Frost Kingdom had stabilized the defense line, and the Ice Witches from Arendelle began to push toward the rear of the devils' territory. Several arcane towers rose from the northern tower, and the witches joined forces to approach the misty forest. The city of Mordor was the main force on the south coast. The city of Mordor that came from the sky brought a powerful reinforcements. At the same time, thousands of golem puppets pushed the front line hundreds of kilometers. At this time, at the edge of the Windspear Hills, hundreds of thousands of coalition forces had arrived. The flag of Mordor was fluttering in the cold wind, but the commander was not Soren, but the Saint Priest Milan. The little girl grew up quickly in the battle. With the guidance of the High Priest, she quickly became the leader of the new generation in the church. At this moment, Milan was wearing a silver-white gorgeous armor, holding a small pale golden shield in one hand, and a five-headed flail that did not match her petite figure in the other hand. However, anyone who saw this flail would have a slight change in expression, because this was a notorious artifact in the multiverse. Item type: Flail of Time, 5 heads. Item grade: Grade 5 artifact. Item description: This is a legendary artifact. As one of the most powerful artifacts in the entire material plane, the Son of Massacre once used this weapon to kill the enemy in the final battle of the gods. This weapon has been stained with the blood of God, and there is a residual murderous aura on it. It has a total of 5 heads, namely poison, fire, electricity, acid, and ice. Any head that attacks the enemy will cause additional attribute damage nearby. This artifact was reshaped by the Lord of Death, and it was endowed with new characteristics and more powerful power. Requirements: Strength above 18, Strength requirement plus 6. Equipment effect: Divine Artifact, God's Blood, Free Movement, Armor Break, Elemental Damage, Cripple, plus 15 Sharpness, plus 20 Toughness, plus 20 Armor Break, plus 15 Bone Break. Weapon Special Effect: Artifact characteristic. This weapon is a legendary artifact. It cannot be destroyed by conventional means and is also immune to disintegration. Only legendary disintegration has a 1% chance of destroying this artifact, but the destroyer must also suffer the backlash of divine power. Weapon special effect. God's blood. This weapon has been soaked in the blood of countless high-level demons, demigods, false gods, and even real gods. Some powerful existences who once coveted the god of slaughter have also died in its hands. Weapon special effect. Elemental damage. Any enemy hit by this artifact will receive 20 points of cold damage, 20 points of poison damage, 20 points of fire damage, 20 points of acid damage, and 20 points of lightning damage. Weapon special effect. Armor-shattering characteristic. As a divine artifact grade 5-headed flail, the Age Flail has a terrifying armor-shattering ability. It can easily shatter the majority of armors. In the case of hitting the enemy, the Age Flail can directly ignore all armors below the divine artifact grade, including full-body armors. Weapon special effect. Free movement. The wielder is immune to magic effects that restrict movement. Weapon special effect. Cripple. The Age Flail has a terrifying lethality. When attacking the enemy, there is a 50% chance of crippling the target directly. The target must forcibly resist the test of toughness when attacked by the Age Flail. Otherwise, their combat power will be reduced because of the cripple. A fierce battle soon broke out. In order to recapture the lost land on the south coast, almost all of the forces were gathered in this battle. With the advance of thousands of golems, the Saint Cardinal Milan also led the bishops to join the battle. Although she looked petite, she was very fierce in battle. No matter what level of demons, even legendary demons, if hit by her, they would either die or be injured. The Age Flail added an additional 100 points of elemental damage every time it hit. This terrifying damage was higher than the Holy Avenger, but it couldn't dispel magic like the Holy Avenger. Under the leadership of the Saint Cardinal Milan, the South Coast Coalition army quickly cut the demons, but at this moment, a strange chant came from behind, and then hundreds of soldiers fell in batches. It's the Hellpemer. The figure of the High Priestess appeared out of nowhere. She frowned and said, "This is the enemy of our Lord. Let's work together to kill him." Since Soren became a god, the Hellpemer had been trying to hide. The two sides were no longer on the same level. If the Hellpemer met Soren, only death would await him. However, as the favorite of Asmodeus, he also had some obligations that couldn't be avoided. When the demons attacked the material plane, the Hellpemer, who was familiar with the material plane, was also sent to the battlefield. A golden light appeared. The Saint Cardinal Milan entered the saint form. With the weakening of the Avatar crisis, Soren's power became stronger and stronger. The most obvious manifestation of the change was the increase in power of his favored, and the best Saint Cardinal had the ability to enter the saint form. Two golden lights flashed across the sky. The High Priestess and the Saint Cardinal rushed to the back of the demons at the same time. They were the favorite of Soren, and if necessary, they could pray for a god to descend to the mortal world. Even if it was a lesser god, they could still fight. Bator Inferno, first floor. After more than 3 million demons teleported to the Bator Inferno, the demons finally began to panic. Although many of the archdevils obeyed the orders of the Lord of Hell, betrayal and usurpation had never stopped. Until now, there was still one archdevil who was permanently sealed in ice because of a rebellion. Even Asmodeus's spouse, Queen of Yuma's mother, also fell in the last rebellion. The demons were very ambitious. They were afraid of Asmodeus, but they also coveted his position. When they knew that the demons had attacked their nest, some of the archdevils on the front line began to waver. Some of the archdevils even began to suspect that Asmodeus wanted to destroy them in one fell swoop. How did Queen of Yuma become the Queen of Hell? Wasn't it because Asmodeus had plotted to get rid of the old woman, and then smoothly made his daughter the new archdevil? What if the demons broke through the defenses of the Bronze Citadel? What would happen to their home? Furthermore, they heard that the Lord of Death was taking revenge for the Underworld's invasion, and no longer remained neutral in this bloody war. Instead, he chose to support the demons. This made the archdevils even more uneasy. Although they were full of ambition, they still wanted to protect their current position. And so, naturally, some of the archdevils began to quietly withdraw their forces to the Bator Inferno. No matter how good a material plane was, it was meaningless if they couldn't take it down in one fell swoop. If their nest was breached by the demons, then they were done for. How did the demons rise? Even now, there were still some ancient natives in the depths of the Bator Inferno, but they could never regain their past glory. The stars in the night sky became brighter and brighter. The power of the gods was recovering, and one by one, the apostles began to appear before the eyes of the people. The demons' attack was firmly blocked near the misty forest, and the demons' army had already reached the bronze citadel. There wasn't much time left for the demons. Even Asmodeus, the Lord of Hell, had to face a choice at this moment. Should he let the Blood War army return to defend the Bator Inferno, or should he face the Church of the Gods in the material plane head-on? If he won, he would be the biggest winner in the multiverse. But if he lost, the Bator Inferno would face an unprecedented catastrophe, and even the other archdevils might unite to resist him again. Chapter 11:15. Bator Inferno, First Floor. No one knew when the fog had shrouded this floor, but the attack of the demons had begun 2 days ago and had not stopped until now. Outside the bronze fortress, the demon corpses had piled up into a mountain. Hundreds of thousands of demons used their corpses to fill up the fortifications. The devils urgently dispatched reinforcements from the rear, but they were still powerless in the face of more than 3 million demons that were constantly increasing. Only the blood army that was fighting in the material plane could stop them. However, with the weakening of the Avatar crisis, the gods led by the God of Light seemed to be aware of what Soren had done in the dark. The angels summoned from the Holy Light Gate frantically stalled the main forces of the devils, and at the same time, the reinforcements from the Skypiercer clan had arrived in the material plane. Now, the devils who were attacked from both sides were under great pressure. Attack. Let the six-armed snake demons attack again. More than 10 secondary demon lords commanded the attack from 8 directions. Although they had paid a huge price, the enemies in the bronze fortress were getting fewer and fewer. There was no technique to speak of in the whole battle. A low-level devil was exchanged with 10 low-level devils, and a high-level devil was exchanged with 10 high-level devils. Even if there were more than 10 Baylor corpses hanging on the top of the bronze fortress, the demons' attack did not stop at all. They madly attacked tirelessly as if no death could stop them. The reinforcements that had arrived at the Bator Inferno were already the 3rd batch. In the small land of the bronze fortress, nearly 1 million demons had died. However, the devils' resistance was getting weaker and weaker. They always had a huge disadvantage when facing the demons, and that was the number of demons always exceeded the number of devils by many times. Rumble. A dull loud noise was heard. After 3 days of continuous attacks by the demons, a part of the wall of the bronze fortress finally collapsed. The wall that was completely made of steel could no longer withstand the demons' attacks, and a huge crack appeared in the whole line of defense. Thousands of middle-level and high-level demons were excited, and even the secondary demon lords rushed up excitedly. As long as there was a crack in the devil's line of defense, the demons' opportunity would come. The 6-armed snake demons waved their long swords and rushed forward. The Baylor laughed wildly and soared into the sky. The assassin demon's figure disappeared into the darkness. The Soul Judgment demon coldly led his army forward. This crack was quickly widened by the demons, and then a fierce street fight broke out. The entire battle lasted until night. After the demons suffered several times the number of casualties, they finally conquered the final palace and captured the bronze fortress that belonged to the Bardi Empire. Deafening cheers rang out. Even the crazy demons couldn't help but roar into the sky. For nearly 1,000 years, they had been suppressed by the demons in the Rift Plane. Now, not only did they counterattack to the Bator Inferno, but they also took down the strategic bronze fortress. Topple the Skull Pillar. Topple the Skull Pillar. Topple the Skull Pillar. The roar of a demon could be heard. Then this voice quickly spread in all directions and countless demons began to roar in response. It was a tower of bones 2 miles high, containing countless demon skulls. This was the devil's trophy, and also the demon's pillar of shame. Right now, they could finally wash away their shame and topple this pillar of skull. Hundreds of thousands of demons gathered and they came to the skull pillar. Under the command of the 3 secondary demon lords, they began to destroy this ancient tower of bones. Since the outbreak of the Bloody War, this skull pillar had already existed, and now the demons could finally destroy it. The material plane. In just 1 day the Devil Legion had retreated hundreds of kilometers, and many places had been completely abandoned. They had harvested a large number of souls. Although the war had only broken out for a short time, the demons' harvest was huge because the material plane had always been the most densely populated world. The Blood War Legion was retreating quickly. It seemed that the Lord of Hell had chosen the former between retreating to the Bator Inferno and fighting the gods in the material plane. The demons had won a great victory. They didn't care whether they had taken down the material plane or not. They only cared about how much they had gained from this operation. There was no doubt. The demons had become the biggest winners in the Avatar crisis. They had first ransacked the underworld and then the material plane. As for the ambition of the Lord of Hell, Asmodeus, no matter if it was the lower demons or the other archdevils, they didn't think that it was a wise choice to fight the gods directly. Although the demons might become the master of the multiverse if they won, the price of losing was also very terrible. The archdevils didn't think that there was much chance of winning. The gods were just afraid of death. If the Lord of Hell was in danger, even if it was possible for them to fall, the gods would personally step in. Countless demons returned with a full load. No world had as many intelligent creatures as the material plane, and no plane had as many souls as the material plane. They only wanted to return to the Bator Inferno with their spoils of war, and then drive those abominable demons back to the abyss. Portals opened one after another. The main force from the bloody war in the abyss began to teleport to the Bator Inferno. Although they had been fighting in the material plane for so long, their losses were still very small. Just the low and mid-level cannon fodder was enough for the mortals in the material plane to deal with for a long time. If the God of Light hadn't summoned the Skypiercer clan, these bloody war legions could have really taken down the material plane. The underworld. Just as the demon army began to return to the Bator Inferno after ransacking the material plane to fight against the demon army, Soren also came to the deepest part of the underworld. He went to visit the ancient god of death, Nero. No one knew what the old and new gods of death talked about. They only knew that before Soren left, he went into the depths of the Netherworld Sea, and then the entire Netherworld Sea formed a huge whirlpool. The death god system was the oldest and the most powerful god system. Since the birth of life, the death god system had never been weaker than other god systems. For a long time. Although the soul stealers had always existed, it was the first time that they had blatantly ransacked the underworld. No matter who it was, no matter how strong the enemy was, they all had to pay the price. Otherwise the death god system would become a joke. This was what Soren had to do. As the new Lord of Death, he had to protect the dignity of the death god system, and he had to make the demons pay a heavy price. The blood war to save the world was completed. Because of the demon army, the demons had to retreat from the material plane. However, Soren's matter was not over yet. He still had a very serious score to settle with the demons. Chapter 11:16. After conquering the Bronze Citadel, everything was smooth sailing. However, the demons did not feel relaxed. Instead, they felt that the battle had become more and more difficult. Some powerful and well-coordinated greater demons began to appear on the first level of the Bator Inferno. They were the vanguard that returned from the material plane and were responsible for stopping the demons' attacks to prevent the situation from deteriorating further. The first level of the Bator Inferno was a huge arsenal. It was the product of countless years of hard work by the demons. Once the thousands of arsenal were destroyed by the demons, it would not be easy to rebuild them. The battle was in a stalemate. It was as if everything had entered a strange calm, but a more terrible storm was brewing. Avernus. A huge portal had been built behind the demons' defense line. Armies of demons began to retreat from the material plane to the Bator Inferno. They left behind a batch of cannon fodder to stop the demons, which was enough to delay the mortals for a while. The demons' strong discipline allowed them to quickly complete the reorganization after returning to the Bator Inferno. Then, armies of demons began to move toward the front lines. They had to stop the demons' attacks first, then find a way to take back the Bronze Citadel, and finally drive the demons back to the abyss. No one knew when. The water of the Styx, which had been flowing peacefully for thousands of years, began to surge. The blood river from Avernus began to rise. Vaguely. Countless souls wailed. They rose and fell with the water of the Styx as if singing a dirge. This day, even the ferryman and the Styx amnesiac fled from the vicinity of the Styx, as if something terrible was about to happen. The army of demons was happily returning to the Bator Inferno. Although they did not conquer the material plane, all the devils had plundered a great deal of wealth from the material plane. They had harvested countless souls from the material plane, and these souls could be used to improve their strength or be transformed into low-level devils for their enslavement. Above the Styx, Soren's figure appeared out of nowhere. His sight passed through time and space and locked onto the demons' barracks in the distance of Avernus. The gigantic portal was still in operation, but the main forces of the devils had quickly and efficiently evacuated from the material plane, leaving behind only some cannon fodder. They were organizing a counterattack against the demon army, and at the same time, some impatient devils were digesting the spoils of war from the material plane. No one can despise death. Anyone who challenges the Grim Reaper must pay the price. Soren's figure gradually faded away. Then a 300-meter-tall black giant appeared in the river Styx. Tens of thousands of souls of the dead flew up from the river Styx. As the 300-meter-tall black giant took a deep breath, tens of thousands of souls of the dead were sucked into its body through its eyes, ears, mouth and nose. Then, the water of the Nether River began to boil. Countless souls of the dead flew into the air. The dried bones that had settled at the bottom of the river were rolled up by the souls of the dead, forming many terrifying and ferocious souls of the dead. They bobbed up and down in the Nether River, letting out sharp and mournful roars that were filled with hatred and anger. The 1,000-feet-tall black giant raised both of its arms as if it was holding up the Milky Way. Along with the great divine power that shook the laws of the Bator Inferno, the river that had flowed peacefully for millions of years across the multiverse was stirred into a 10,000-foot wave. Boom! A terrifying wave rose from the Nether River. The water of the Nether River seemed endless. It swept up the river of blood and formed a terrifying wave that surged onto the land and swept towards the devils. For a moment, the world changed color. The power of time, space, and the laws collapsed. A gate of death tore open in the void, and tens of thousands of death servants crossed through space to reach the Bator Inferno. The water of the Nether River swept across the world. Everything happened so quickly. Even the incomparably elite devil army did not have time to react. Countless devils screamed in terror. Those that could fly tried their best to fly, while those that could teleport desperately tried to escape. However, the power of the laws of the Bator Inferno seemed to be interfered with by some powerful divine power. Some of their abilities were completely ineffective. This powerful divine power had changed reality and space. There was no room for them to react. The water of the Nether River poured down like the Milky Way. Countless devils did not even have time to escape. In the blink of an eye, they were swept into the Nether River. The terrifying water quickly corroded their flesh, and even the pit fiends quickly melted under the water. In the blink of an eye, the army of demons suffered huge losses. As the demons that were swept into the river Styx died, countless souls of the dead gushed out of their broken bodies. The number of souls was incalculable. The souls of the dead gushed out of the demons' bodies. They tried to break free from the shackles of the river Styx, but no matter how hard they tried, they were still swept forward by the water of the river Styx. The wrath of a true god. The waters spread for 3,000 miles. The huge waves that rolled up from the Nether River stretched for 3,000 miles, washing hundreds of devils into the Nether River. The souls that they plundered from the material plane also flowed along with the water of the Nether River, gradually converging toward the mainstream of the Nether River in the Hell of Bator. Traces of the terrifying disaster were left behind on the broken land. Everything had happened too quickly. There were even many devil corpses that had not been completely corroded, leaving behind countless wreckage on the ground that was riddled with holes. No! An earth-shattering roar rang out, followed by the appearance of a blood-red figure with dark skin and hair. It had a pair of dark red horns on its head, and it was wearing a gorgeous blood-red robe and holding a ruby scepter. In an instant, the entire Bator Inferno shook, and countless demons and devils felt uneasy. The phantom let out a furious roar, and quickly turned into a great devil that was hundreds of meters tall. It then charged towards the black giant above the Nether River. Rumble. The entire first layer of the Bator Inferno shook. Countless souls surrounded the black giant, finally forming a pitch-black armor. It clashed head-on with the Lord of Hell in front of it. Under the terrifying collision of divine power, the Nether River quickly cracked and collapsed. A fissure that was tens of kilometers long snaked from the Nether River to a distant valley. Space shattered. The moment the two clashed, the surrounding space was clearly distorted. One could faintly see traces of spatial turbulence. The battlefield of the gods was the astral plane. Since the war between the first generation of demons and the ancient gods of order, most of the battles between the true gods broke out in the astral plane. This was because they could easily destroy a layer. Now that the influence of the Avatar crisis was almost gone, if Soren fought with all his might, it would be impossible to destroy the Bator Inferno. However, overturning the first layer of Avernus was definitely possible. The Lord of Hell stared at the black giant in front of him. As one of the oldest existences, no one could guess what he was thinking. He only launched one attack and then stopped. He then glanced at the wounds left on the ground, and then turned into a phantom again. The black giant began to dissipate after the Lord of Hell turned into a phantom. Thousands of souls poured out of his body and then merged into the tributary of the Nether River. At this time, the Nether River was already densely packed with countless souls, but even the greediest demon did not have any thoughts in his mind at this time. He could only watch as countless souls flowed along the Nether River and finally reach the place where these souls should go. The underworld. The city of death. As the black giant dissipated, Soren, who was standing at the top of the palace, also shook a little. Then a trace of golden blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Master. A servant of death flew over with a pale face. However, Soren quickly waved his hand and said, "It's okay. Now, send someone to take over the main channel of the Nether River in the Bator Inferno." The Lord of Hell actually held back. According to Soren's idea, Asmodeus would definitely fight with him. However, he did not expect the Lord of Hell to be so powerful that he could hold back under such circumstances. A golden light appeared. The next moment, Soren's figure appeared in the astral plane. He still hasn't come out? The figure of the God of Light appeared. He seemed to be a little disappointed but also seemed to have expected it. He murmured, "It seems that our plan has been seen through by him." Soren did not speak. After a long time he said, "After all, that is the Lord of Hell, Asmodeus. Even if he didn't guess that we would join forces, he would suspect that my appearance in the Bator Inferno was a conspiracy against him. What a pity. If he could lead Asmodeus to the astral plane, it would not be impossible for him and the God of Light to join forces to kill this super boss in the multiverse. This was the only time that he and the God of Light could join forces. This was the arrangement of fate and history. If it were not for all that happened in the Avatar crisis, neither he nor the God of Light would join forces to deal with another person. However, it was a pity that the Lord of Hell saw through all of this. He held back. He watched Soren roll up the water of the Nether River and slaughter countless demons. After the souls that they had plundered were swept back into the Nether River, he still held back the urge to attack. This kind of cooperation could only happen once. Once the Avatar crisis was over, Soren and the God of Light would be the two sides of light and darkness. It was absolutely impossible for them to join forces to deal with the Lord of Hell again. In the endless void. The disappointment on the God of Light's face did not last long. He turned to look at the source of chaos and said slowly, "Everything is coming to an end." Yes. Soren also whispered, "It is finally coming to an end." The power of the gods was recovering. The stars in the night sky were getting brighter and brighter. The energy storm that caused the Avatar crisis was disappearing. It would not be long before the gods returned to their god's kingdom. At that time all the battles would stop temporarily. Because everyone needed some time to face the world that was full of holes after the Avatar crisis. Chapter 11:17. The devils were finally driven back to hell. However, after experiencing this unprecedented calamity, the material plane was also scarred. The survivors dragged their tired bodies back to their homes that had been turned into ruins. Even the temples that served the gods were now less than 30%. For a long time, everyone had to find ways to rebuild their homes, and with the drastic reduction of the population, the gods had to temporarily stop fighting to restore their strength. Many gods' churches had been destroyed, and some gods were even facing the risk of their divinity being downgraded. In the next 100 years, they had to find ways to ensure the number of their believers, or they might fall by a level. The Avatar crisis was not completely over. In the Elven Kingdom, the Queen of Spiders was still secretly fighting with the Elven divine system, and the battle between the Lady of Silvermoon and the Lady of Night had broken out for the third time. But Mordor had returned to peace. After repelling the invading devils, the mortals who served Soren began to rebuild their homes. The Windspear Hills became the most populous and prosperous place on the south coast today. In the end, Soren gave up the idea of helping Gloria get the priesthood of magic because Mystra was too powerful. She was even more powerful than the Dread Lord. Midnight inherited the power of the goddess of magic, but from that time on, Midnight was no longer the Midnight of the past. Every goddess of magic's real name was Mystra. This continuity represented a kind of personality overlap. Soren was not sure whether Gloria defeated Mystra or the goddess of magic was resurrected in her. Gloria's growth time was still too short. She hadn't even fully mastered the priesthood of prophecy, let alone the priesthood of magic. Gloria was just a native after all, and couldn't integrate divine power as easily as Soren. Even for Soren, when he first obtained divinity, he paid a great price in order to completely eliminate the consciousness in it. Gloria needed time to grow. It would take at least 100 years for her to fully master the priesthood of prophecy and mage. The Avatar crisis was about to end. Soren didn't want to see the goddess of magic come back to life in Gloria's body because of his interference. This was a rare period of tranquility. The powers of the gods were rapidly recovering. Some gods were still fighting to the death, while others had already begun to clean up the mess. As the god of death, Soren's every move was closely watched by the gods. There was no other way. He had risen too quickly, and too many gods had died at his hands. The gods were full of suspicion toward him, and any action he took after becoming the Lord of Death might cause them to have other ideas. Most of the old gods were on guard against Soren. If he were to get involved in the battle between the Lady of Night, the Lady of Silver Moon, and the Goddess of Magic, it would definitely cause a stronger reaction from them. Should he do that? In the end, Soren gave up. Because this matter could be planned in the next 1,000 or 10,000 years, and if he chose to do it at this time, it might be another terrifying battle. Soren's foundation was not enough to support a full-scale war. Whether it was him, Vivian, Lillian, Princess Royal, or Gloria, almost all of them were new gods, and they had too much to learn and digest. Even if Soren now had great divine power, there was still a big gap between him and the God of Light in terms of real combat power. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been injured after only one fight with the Lord of Hell. Time passed little by little. Soren stayed in Arendelle for a long time, and Gloria didn't say anything about it because she knew that Soren could only come back in the future, even if he wanted to. In the end, the Fallen Witch chose her own path. She didn't try to become a god with the power from the goddess of pestilence, but chose to become a great arcanist and a destiny wizard. In the end, between becoming a great arcanist and a god, she chose the former. Soren let her leave her mark on the floating city, but still gave her a trace of divinity. If one day she was tired of her mortal life, she could also try to regain her priesthood. The stars in the sky decreased a lot. But the night sky was very bright, and the gods were waiting for the moment to return. Misty Forest. This was the last stop of Soren's journey. He had just crossed the desert of death and arrived here from the Eastern Kingdom. His purpose was to see the land left behind by the father of the oak tree, as well as the beautiful and passionate dryads. Sometimes Soren would think about it. Was the oak tree father already dead, or did it exist in some other unknown way? He thought it was more likely to be the latter. Because if the father of the oak tree had fallen, the misty forest shouldn't have such great divine power. But if the father of the oak tree hadn't fallen, it was very likely that he was now approaching the existence of a greater divine power. Soren didn't understand. It was as if there were many things in the endless multiverse that the gods were also exploring. Perhaps after returning to the Pantheon, Soren would be able to find some answers. A group of beautiful dryads welcomed his arrival, and the leader of the dryads, Karina, presented him with a gift. It was a golden seed. In order to fight against the demons, we used the power left behind by our father. Karina's expression had a trace of piety and excitement. She handed the golden seed in front of Soren and whispered, "After defeating the demons, this seed appeared. The great father of the oak tree might be telling us something. But we can't understand his will." Soren reached out and took the golden seed. It contained some divine power, but it didn't have the will of the father of the oak tree. This seed might be able to give birth to a god. But it definitely wouldn't be the father of the oak tree. The material plane already has the goddess of the forest. Even if you take root and sprout, you can't replace her. Soren felt the breath of life in the seed, shook his head and sighed, "Fine. I have some fate with the father of the oak tree. Let fate decide where you should go." Soren stretched out his hand and drew in the void. His power was so great that he opened a crack in the spacetime turbulence. Then Soren wrapped a trace of divine power around the golden seed in front of him and sent it into the spacetime turbulence. There was no room for it to grow in this world. As a divine seed left behind by the father of the oak tree, its potential was at least above the mid-level divine power. It needed a world to give it room to grow. Sauron had left a divine imprint on the seed. Only when it reached a new world full of vitality would the imprint disappear, and the seed of divinity would germinate. Fate would decide where it should go. The Avatar crisis was finally over. With the disappearance of the last energy storm, the power of the gods completely returned, and at the same time, the material plane also had a strong repulsive force against them. A dazzling golden light rose from the earth. And there was no doubt that Mordor City was undoubtedly the most dazzling in the material plane at this moment. The Lord of Death, Sauron. The twins of Fear, Vivian and Lillian. The god of prophecies and mages, Gloria. The cat girl, guide of the underworld, Lulu. A golden light column rose over Mordor City, and Sauron's figure appeared in it. As an existence close to the great divine power, the material plane rejected him very obviously, and his divine brilliance was the most dazzling in the whole world. There were only 3 places in the material plane that had such brilliance. Lady of the Night. The god of light. When they were expelled from the material plane at the same time, Sauron saw them and they saw Sauron. The gods were silent. Because too many things happened in this catastrophe, they gained and lost a lot. Brother. Brother? 2 beautiful figures, one black and one white, appeared. They rose with the golden light and held Sauron's palm tightly. Vivian and Lillian looked at Sauron happily and said, "No one can separate us anymore." The life of the gods was immortal. They had endless time to squander. Sauron smiled and picked up the 2 little girls. Then he glanced at Gloria, who was looking at him tenderly. Finally he could have a good rest. Maybe while accompanying the most important people in his life, he could think about what to do to make the world more interesting. He was so powerful that the gods felt uneasy and panicked. It was time to give them some time to relax and eliminate some hostility. Yes. Sauron hugged Vivian in his arms and whispered, "We don't have to worry about anything separating us anymore." End of text. P.S. This is the end of the text. The last bit is what happened after the Avatar crisis. It belongs to the epilogue of this book. Chapter 11:18. The Frost Kingdom, Arendelle. Ward came down from the deck expressionlessly, ignored the swearing of the bosun, took some money and walked towards the tavern. Wine could numb him. It made him forget the pain of losing Caitlin, forget the fallen comrades, forget the gloomy undead, forget the ferocious devils. Since the end of the Avatar crisis, Ward, who was alone, began to self-exile. He lost his home under the attack of the demons, lost his family in the attack of the gnolls, lost his lover in the scourge of the undead, and lost his friends in the battle to repel the devils. A disaster had taken away everything from Walter, allowing him to quickly grow from a hunter to a terrifying warrior. His body was covered with scars from lizard men, ogres, gnolls, demons, undead, devils, and even other humans. Fate seemed to have abandoned him, but it also favored him. Ward lost too much, but in the end he survived the disaster. He survived 100 battles. After completely repelling the devil's army, the nobles invited him to work in the south, but Ward just took his sword and embarked on a journey of wandering. He was tired. Not only his body but his heart was also abnormally tired. He wandered around the continent for more than a year, went to the Eagle Mountain in the east, went to Snake Island in the South Sea, and finally mixed into an unknown caravan and became an inconspicuous sailor. Ward. The bosun of the caravan was very dissatisfied with the seemingly unruly Ward, but before he could speak, the captain patted him on the shoulder and shook his head gently. Only the captain of the caravan knew who Ward was, because he had seen Ward fighting on the front line in the north. The pain caused by the Avatar crisis was being healed by time, and the prosperous Arendelle was gradually recovering from the aftermath of the disaster. Some warriors who retired from the battlefield began to rebuild their families. The pain in their eyes was hidden in the deepest part of their hearts. Only in the dead of night would they sadly recall their fallen comrades in battle. Humans, dwarves, elves, halflings, orcs, lizardmen. Whether good or evil, they all stood on the same side in the final confrontation. They must drive the devils out of the world. Everyone had paid a painful price. More than a year after the end of the Avatar crisis, Arendelle welcomed a large number of newborns. Many women with children could be seen in the residential area outside the port. Men who had put down their weapons began to rebuild their homes and adapt to the unfamiliar work. War would only bring destruction, but creation required hands and wisdom. Ward was like a ghost strolling in the crowd. His beard was unshaven, and he wore a shabby sailor's suit. He looked inconspicuous, but people kept a distance from him. He entered the tavern and threw the reward for a flight on the bar. Then he picked up a wine barrel and walked to the corner. A prostitute glanced at his strong body, but after seeing Ward's eyes, she retreated. She had met many people. There was no doubt that Ward was the most dangerous of them all. There were guards, residents, sailors, and all kinds of people in the tavern. The Avatar crisis had ended more than a year ago, but there were still people in the tavern bragging about their past experiences. A small southern guard was bragging about how he had killed a tall ogre and how he had followed the army of Mordor to defeat a group of devils. The people next to him listened attentively. Only less than 30% of people came back alive in the final confrontation with the devils. In Arendel's safe rear, under the protection of the great Princess Royal, many ordinary people had never seen the devils at all. Ward drank quietly by himself. He listened to others bragging and talking expressionlessly until all the money was spent. Then he stood up slightly tipsy, walked out of the tavern and walked towards the alley. In Mordor City, it was not allowed to urinate or defecate in the alley, but the guards of Arendelle did not care. He did not like Mordor City very much. Although it was prosperous, the rules were too strict. "No. I beg you." Ward, who was peeing in the corner, heard a woman begging for mercy. He glanced up and saw two fierce men dragging a woman into the back alley. Rats. There was such a group of people in every city. They did not dare to set foot on the battlefield, but they liked to bully ordinary people. Ward staggered over, and the two rats who were active underground suddenly became alert. They took out daggers from their waists and said fiercely, "Go away, drunkard. This is not something you can control." Hearing the rats' words, Ward could not help but smile. A cold light flashed. In the woman's exclamation, Ward twisted her arm, then lifted her with one hand and threw her directly to the rat next to him. "Get out of here." Ward glanced coldly at the woman next to him. She was moderately beautiful, a little plump, not tall, about 20 years old, with a little freckle on her face. The woman timidly glanced at Ward, who reeked of alcohol. She gently thanked him and ran outside. The back alley soon quieted down. Ward picked up the fainted rats with one hand and walked deeper into the darkness. He had been to many places and knew how to deal with these rats. This bit of entertainment might be a rare, relaxing pastime for him. The peaceful life that his countless comrades had exchanged for with their lives should not be destroyed by these insignificant trash. The night passed. The next day, Ward lay lazily on the goods by the dock, basking in the sun. He had run out of money. The sailor's pay was not much, and it was only enough for 2 days at most. The warm sea breeze blew, and Ward narrowed his eyes to recall the past until a shadow was reflected in front of him. There was a person, a woman, standing beside him and looking at him. The woman from yesterday. She was wearing a shabby linen dress and holding a small child in her hand, about 5 or 6 years old. The woman's expression was a little uneasy, but the child poked his head out to look at him, not afraid of strangers at all. "What's the matter?" Ward opened his eyes and looked at her. The woman looked uneasy and said, "Thank you so much for yesterday. Don't you have a place to live? If you don't mind, you can stay at my house for a few days. You can move out when you find a job." Her eyes were clear and there was only pure gratitude. Ward looked at the woman. Obviously she thought of him as a down-and-out sailor. Many sailors would sleep on the streets when they spent all their money and couldn't find a job. He just didn't like the smell in the cabin. Ward was about to shake his head and refuse, but soon his eyes narrowed. He saw a figure poking his head out in the crowd. Rat. He couldn't help but glance at the woman in front of him. Her clothes were shabby, she didn't have any jewelry, and she had a child. She didn't look like a rich person. Such a woman shouldn't attract rats except for a little beauty, but there were many more beautiful women around the tavern. Why were these rats chasing after her? Soon Ward nodded. The caravan would stay here for 3 days to sell goods. Maybe he could also have some fun. The woman's house wasn't big, but it was clean and tidy. The furniture was old, but it was wiped clean. There was needlework inside. This was a diligent woman. The location of the house was very special. Although it was close to the edge of the dock, there was a lot of construction going on next to it. Ward understood the reason at a glance. Arendelle was expanding, and this place would soon be expropriated and demolished. This could get a lot of money from the city hall and a new place to live. This money was enough to move many rats. This city was learning from Mordor City, but it was clear that there were not as pure laws as Mordor City. The rats wanted a piece of the pie, and there might be the support of the nobles behind them. Where's the child's father? Ward looked at the old house. It was already a bit old. Dead. The woman's expression was gloomy, but then she raised her head stubbornly and said, "He died on the battlefield in the south. He was a hero. Not a coward who ran away. There was obviously a story. Not everyone had the courage to fight against the devil. Ward had seen many deserters and even executed some himself." Ward didn't answer. He just found a clean place to lie down and bask in the sun. You must be hungry. After saying that, the woman's expression became gloomy again. Her eyes were red. Although she stubbornly said that her husband was a hero, the news sent back by the army was that her husband was a deserter. Perhaps she already believed it in her heart, but she had to insist in front of the child. She couldn't tell the child that his father was a coward. The woman quietly wiped the corner of her eyes and said softly, "I'll go make something for you to eat." Ward didn't answer, nor did he look down on her. He knew how much courage it took to face the devil on the battlefield. He also felt fear, but in the end he defeated it and chopped off the head of the pit fiend with his own hands. His comrades were all dead. He was the only one who survived. The conversation just now made Ward recall those familiar faces. There were many heroes who shone like stars in the Avatar crisis. Ward wasn't one of them, but they also fought on the front lines. Countless comrades were buried on the battlefield. The disaster was over, but the pain left behind was still buried in the depths of these survivors. "Do you know martial arts?" The little boy next to him looked at him as if he wanted to reach out and touch his sword. Such a big child wasn't afraid of strangers at all. He was a brave little fellow. Ward took the sword and tossed it over, nodding, "Be careful. Don't hurt yourself." The little fellow curiously grabbed the sword hilt, but his face was red and he couldn't pick it up. Ward couldn't help but laugh. The little boy looked up and said, "Can you teach me martial arts?" Ward lowered his head and looked at him. "Why?" The little boy looked at Ward seriously and clenched his fist. "This way I can protect my mother. There are many bad people who bully us and want to steal our house." Ward's calm face finally showed a hint of emotion. Chapter 11:19. Learning martial arts is very difficult. Ward patted the little boy's head. The little guy raised his head and said seriously, "I'm not afraid of hardships. Can you teach me?" Ward took back his sword and stood up. "Maybe when you grow up." About 10 minutes later, the woman came out of the kitchen with a large bowl of fish soup and black bread. Because it was close to the sea, the residents of Arendelle had a good life. At least they could satisfy the needs of the appropriate amount of meat. There was some vegetable stew in the pot. The woman first served Ward a bowl of fish soup and then a bowl of vegetable porridge for the little boy. Then she said a little uneasily, "Sorry for the inhospitality. This is all we have at home." Ward took a sip of the fish soup and smiled. "It tastes good." The woman couldn't help but smile. She broke off a piece of black bread and soaked it in the bowl to soften it. The little boy sitting next to her looked at Ward from time to time and then at his mother. The three of them didn't speak. The woman was a little uneasy. Ward thought of his past. When he was still a hunter, his life was almost the same as now. Suddenly his ears twitched. He couldn't help but frown and stand up. "You guys stay here and don't go out." He got up and strode out of the house. The woman seemed to have guessed something and looked a little terrified. Ward went out and grabbed a wretched man from the corner. He closed the door and slammed the man against the wall. Not far away, a few fierce-looking men quickly approached. Cough, cough. The wretched man who was slammed against the wall had a sinister expression. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He gritted his teeth and said, "Who are you? How dare you meddle in our sea shark gang's business? Haven't you heard of our boss, the blood shark? I advise you not to meddle in other people's business. Be careful not to be thrown into the sea to feed the sharks." Ward looked like a down-and-out sailor. The man believed that he had heard of the blood shark. But he was disappointed. To Ward, a mouse was a mouse. No matter how impressive a nickname was, it couldn't change the fact that they were a mouse that couldn't be exposed to the light. 3 to 5 fierce men were approaching. They were hiding weapons like daggers on their bodies. The people living in the slums had a keen intuition for danger. When they saw that a fight was about to break out, they immediately hid. These rats abducted and sold people, forced women into prostitution, and did all kinds of evil. None of the poor people wanted to have anything to do with them. At this time they were afraid that they could not hide fast enough. Ward's brows furrowed. He casually tossed aside the man in his hand and walked over. The cold light of a dagger appeared, and 3 to 5 fierce men surrounded him. A woman's cry of surprise could be heard. Crack. But in the next moment, the crisp sound of bones breaking rang out. The man's arm that was holding the dagger was strangely twisted, and he let out a shrill scream. Walter threw out a whip kick, and Mouse, who wanted to sneak up on him, was kicked 5 meters away. When he fell to the ground, he fainted. These lowly rats could only bully the commoners. "Just you wait. The wretched man whose face was covered in blood crawled up and said ruthlessly, "You actually dare to meddle in the affairs of the sea sharks gang. You can wait to be fed to the sharks in the sea. And that bitch, she will be sold to a brothel and suffer a fate worse than death." The rats who could still move fled outside, not caring about the other guys who could not move. Ward spat on the ground. His hand holding the hilt trembled slightly, as if he was trying to restrain something. This was Arendelle, the Pearl of the Frost Kingdom, the territory of Queen Anna. He could not kill indiscriminately. The dock area. On a merchant ship, the burly bosun frowned and looked at the dock. He said in a deep voice, "Where is Ward? Why is he gone?" The short and fat sailor next to him showed a wretched smile and said, "Someone just saw him leave with a woman with a big butt holding a child. I was wondering why this guy didn't look for women every time he docked. It turns out that he likes this kind of thing." The life of a sailor was very boring. Liquor and prostitutes were their favorite pastimes. The bosun's mouth showed a wretched smile, but then he pulled a long face and said, "Remember to inform him to come back when you set off. Don't forget the time by playing on a woman's belly." As soon as his voice fell, a skinny sailor ran over in a fluster shouting, "Not good, boss. I just saw Ward fighting with the sea shark gang in the slums. Now they are calling for help. Something big is going to happen." The faces of the sailors suddenly turned ugly. One of the bearded sailors spat and said in a deep voice, "This guy really knows how to cause trouble. What should we do now?" "The sea shark gang is the local tyrant here. They have killed a lot of people. We can't fight with them." The bosun's face was also ugly. He scolded, "This bastard. Immediately send someone to inform the captain and get rid of the goods as soon as possible. No matter what, he is one of us. Now we will bring him back and leave as soon as possible after we get rid of the goods. The sea shark gang won't let this go." Although they hated Ward's unruly behavior, they couldn't leave him behind at this time. The others looked a little hesitant, but soon they acted. Some people cursed, "This bastard. I have to run away after playing for 2 days. When we get to Blackwater Port, we must make him treat me to drinks and prostitutes." "Yes. Let him treat us to prostitutes. Let's catch him and beat him up first. Then let him treat us to prostitutes. Tell him not to go, just watch from the side." A wave of obscenities. But even though they were cursing, many of the sailors quickly picked up their weapons. Their caravan was on the route from the north coast to the east. This route was full of danger, and many of the sailors were friends who had gone through life and death situations. On the other side, as if a storm was coming, some fierce-looking men walked out of the dark alleys. They hid their weapons and gathered in the slums. A small group of patrol guards noticed something unusual and wanted to go over to take a look. But soon 2 young men carrying bags of money went to their captain. The captain took the bags of money and weighed them in his hand. He immediately smiled and said, "Don't make a big deal out of it. Just take care of that sailor. If things get out of hand, we won't have a good time." A few sailors went to the city to find the captain, while the others picked up their weapons and walked toward the slums. "Try not to fight with the sea shark gang. We will take Ward back to the ship." The bosun pondered and gritted his teeth. "They won't dare to mess around on the ship. Don't worry about the woman. Let the sea shark gang deal with her." He wanted to save Ward, but he had to be responsible for the lives of his men. At this time he could only sacrifice the poor woman. If they completely offended these local tyrants, there would be endless trouble. In the future there would be all kinds of rats in Arendelle looking for trouble. The rats with weapons walked out of the dark corners one by one. Soon hundreds of people gathered. The slums were in chaos. Many people were so scared that they hid in their rooms and closed their doors and windows tightly. They were not in a hurry to take action. Instead, they surrounded the woman's house until a fierce man with scars from his forehead to his neck arrived. "You're the one who went against the Sea Shark gang?" Blood Shark Vic, a northerner and a wanted criminal. After washing his name, he joined the nobles and became the leader of the rats. He was cruel and fierce. The woman appeared out of nowhere and stood behind Ward. She looked scared and her body trembled, but she did not hide in the house. "I'm sorry." She trembled behind Ward. "I've implicated you. You should go. Don't worry about us." Ward smiled. He did not move. He just held his trembling hand on the hilt of his sword. "Very brave." Shueisha smiled ferociously. From the beginning, he had been observing Ward in front of him. After seeing his trembling hands, Shueisha was sure that Ward's heart wasn't as calm as his face. He was so scared that even his hands were trembling. He was just pretending to be calm. Blood Shark showed a mocking smile and looked around. Although the doors and windows were closed, many people were peeping. This was a good opportunity to show his power and make it convenient for him to take over this land in the future. The 2 people I sent to catch this woman yesterday, were you the one who did it? Blood Shark looked at Ward with fierce eyes. Where are they? Ward said expressionlessly, dead. Blood Shark's face suddenly became gloomy. He said ferociously, you're looking for death. The veins on Ward's arm bulged. Although there was still no change on his face, the uncontrollable bloodthirsty excitement had enveloped his heart. He had not been so thirsty for blood and killing for a long time. The emotions that had been suppressed for a long time by relying on strong alcohol were boiling. This made his body tremble. Blood Shark was very satisfied with Ward's performance, because his words made the seemingly tough sailor in front of him tremble in fear. He enjoyed the feeling now and was ready to surrender without fighting. But at this time, a mouse ran to him and whispered a few words. He immediately narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, take them down. A group of sailors was approaching. Obviously it was for the guy in front of him. He could not let these sailors take the man away, so he had to catch him first. 7 or 8 fierce thugs with weapons approached with a grin. Ward's trembling body made them think that the other side was scared. It was too easy to deal with such a frightened enemy. If it were not for the boss wanting to show his power, there would be no need to call so many people over. A cold light appeared. The thug on the side couldn't help but pull out his dagger and rush forward. Ward, who had been trembling all this time, suddenly stopped. His eyes were bloodshot. He stepped sideways and crashed into the enemy's body. Then he grabbed the enemy's wrist and twisted his body to swing the dagger. In an instant, blood spurted out. The enemy behind him covered his throat and fell down. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. When the first enemy died, Ward seemed to have put down some kind of shackle. His expression was calm and terrifying. He pulled out his long sword with a clang. Chapter 11:20. The swift and fierce sword light seemed to cut everything into pieces. Ward's figure leaped out like a lone wolf, rushing towards hundreds of enemies alone. The sailor's exclamation came from afar, but then it stopped abruptly as if someone had grabbed their throat. 2 burly men rushed towards Ward, but just at the moment when the 2 sides clashed, 2 bloody lights suddenly appeared, followed by a dull sound of falling to the ground. The fierce and burly thugs covered the wound on their necks and spurted out blood. The speed of Ward's sword was so fast that they couldn't see his movements clearly. Chi. Not far away, the bosun couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air and murmured, Ward, that son of a bitch, is actually so powerful? Shueisha was also a little panicked at this moment, because he also couldn't see the moment Ward made his move. As a veteran of the gray area, he obviously understood that he had encountered a tough opponent. This wasn't a strength that an ordinary sailor could have. Stop him. Shueisha quickly retreated, then turned his head and grinned at his men behind him and said, Get the crossbow. We've encountered a tough opponent. An expert. At this moment, even an idiot knew that Ward was actually a very powerful warrior. He cut down 5 or 6 thugs like cutting melons and vegetables. Shueisha knew that he couldn't do this kind of strength. However, there were ways to deal with experts, and people in the gray area had their own ways. Soon, some of the thugs in the rear retreated, and then they took out canvas packages and set up Arendel's crossbow that was listed as a prohibited item. In the face of more than 10 crossbowmen, not to mention an ordinary expert, even a first-class warrior could capsize in the gutter. Be careful. The bosun let out a cry of alarm and finally gritted his teeth and said, Do it. No matter what, Ward is one of our men. It's not up to these rats to tell us what to do. Sailing was a dangerous thing. These sailors, who had been drifting on the most dangerous sea routes for years, were also unruly. Their tolerance was only for the sake of a better life. However, if others dared to flip the table, they would dare to pull out a knife and kill them. Basically, the docks in every city were controlled by rats, and the sailors of the merchant caravans would more or less be exploited by these local tyrants. It wasn't because the sailors couldn't beat them, but more because the strong dragon couldn't suppress the local tyrants, so they could only tolerate some of their actions. However, if the rats' actions were too much, these valiant sailors wouldn't be afraid to face them head-on. The unsheathed Ward was like a ferocious lone wolf. With a single leap, he charged into the encirclement of dozens of rats. Accompanied by the swift and fierce sword light, the enemies fell one by one while clutching their wounds. Ruthless, deadly, crazy, bloodthirsty, terrifying, it was unknown when Walter's eyes had turned red, as if he was a demon that was about to devour people. Just one look from him was enough to make many mice tremble in fear. Swoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air rang out. Walter grabbed a rat and used it as a shield, but with blood splattering everywhere, a crossbow shot him in the shoulder. A woman's scream came. But Walter didn't look back. He just threw away the corpse in front of him and pulled out the crossbow with a ferocious smile. He casually tore off his tattered shirt, revealing hideous scars. On his chest, there was a terrifying scar that was 30 centimeters long. No one knew what kind of monster had left it behind. Numerous wounds were all over Walter's body. Many of the injuries were absolutely fatal in the eyes of others, but he was now alive. Ha! Walter took a deep breath, and then his muscles swelled at a speed visible to the naked eye. Crackling sounds of explosions could be heard. Walter's figure grew rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, he was a little giant more than 2 meters tall. Chi! There was a sound of cold air, followed by Shueisha's exasperated voice. Shoot! Shoot him! Damn it! He's actually a berserker. Berserk! Walter smiled ferociously. Killing allowed him to let go of the shackles in his heart and release the bloodlust in his body. In the face of the oncoming crossbow, he just protected his head and rushed directly toward Shueisha. Puchi puchi. A crossbow shot at Walter's body, but all the arrows were stuck in his muscles. At the moment, Walter had more than a dozen crossbows in his body. He was dripping with blood, but his momentum became more and more terrifying. His speed did not decrease at all. On the contrary, his offensive became more and more fierce. Brr. Walter rushed over and grabbed a rat and tore it in half. He waved his long sword and instantly cut an enemy in half. The quality of the long sword was not good. He threw it away casually and picked up a heavy one-handed axe. The fear of death enveloped Shueisha. The rat leader, who had been in the gray area since young, was now extremely pale. He frantically ran back and desperately ordered his men to shoot arrows. However, Walter pounced on him like a madman and lifted his 300-pound body with one hand as if he was lifting a chicken. Walter's blood-red pupils stared at Shueisha, making him feel cold and weak. Just when he thought he was going to die today, a dense sound of footsteps sounded, and then a group of Arendel's guards surrounded him. Then a burly officer appeared and shouted, "Everyone stop! Otherwise you will be killed on the spot for rebellion." The movement here finally alarmed Arendel's army. Not only were there dead people but even crossbows were used. This situation was already beyond the control of ordinary guards. There's hope. Shueisha saw the garrison officer in the crowd that he would show filial piety every month. Although he was not the leading officer, this situation was his only chance to survive. He suddenly struggled violently and shouted, "Lord Cornet! It's me. Help me." Cornet heard Shueisha's voice. Although he hated this arrogant guy, the other party would give him a large sum of money every month. At this time he had to think of a way to save him. Let him go. The garrison officer of the port area shouted in a low voice, put his hand on the hilt of his sword, and said in a deep voice, "Seaman, I order you to let him go immediately and let him be captured. Otherwise all of you will go to prison." As soon as the voice fell, the officer next to him shouted angrily, "Shut up, idiot." This sentence was directed at Cornet. Although the other party was an officer of the army, he was also the garrison officer of the port area. This time, because there were too many people, he asked the army to help. But in terms of status, his official rank was higher than the other party, so Cornet immediately said to the other party in dissatisfaction, "Kurzworth, I'm in charge of this area. Please pay attention to your words and actions, or I'll report to your superior." The burly officer named Kurzworth looked at him coldly. He then spat disdainfully, and walked towards the berserk Ward with an agitated expression. When he was about 10 meters away from Ward, he suddenly saluted and then said solemnly, 27th Northland Legion Highland Death Squad, 35th Squad, Sergeant Captain Kurzworth greets Commander Ward. Having said that, the burly officer took out a dark red metal insignia and wore it on his body with great solemnity. "You know me?" Ward's blood-red eyes turned, and he seemed to have regained much of his rationality. He casually threw the limp Shueisha on the ground. The surroundings were deathly silent. Only the soldiers from the army cried out in surprise as if they knew something. Kurzworth's expression was excited and he said in a deep voice, "In the Battle of the Desolate Desert, the Highland Death Squad of the 27th Northland Legion participated in the counterattack against the 5th Blood War Legion. When Sir Ward killed the pit fiends I was nearby. However, I don't think he noticed me." "Counterattack against the Devil Legion? Blood War Legion?" Pit fiends? Every word of the burly legion caused the surrounding sailors to gasp. After listening to his words, the sailors not far away were stunned. Clang, 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 clang. Even the scimitar in the hands of the bosun fell to the ground. Cornet's entire body went cold at this moment. He suddenly realized that this matter was troublesome. The boorish-looking sailor in front of him was actually a commander who had participated in the counterattack against the devils. If this matter was not handled properly, many nobles in Arendelle would be in trouble. After the bloody counterattack against the devils, many veterans and adventurers had chosen to give up their positions in the army and return to their ordinary lives. However, he never expected that this sailor in front of him was one of them. A commander who had participated in the counterattack against the devils and killed a pit fiend. Such an honor was enough to be received by the Queen of Arendelle as a lord of a city. He had actually run off to become a dejected sailor. Was this guy crazy? Cornet's eyes turned, and then he said in exasperation, "Men, hurry up and capture all these damned rats. I want to hang these bastards with my own hands. They actually dared to attack the hero who repelled the devils and protected the world." P.S. The new book, Super Floating City, has been released. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.